Good afternoon. I'd like to call the September 30th, 2014 City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Francisco. Here. Hart. Here. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. White. Mayor Snyder.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We'll start with public comment. I have a couple of speaker slips here in 2 minutes. At the podium, we'll start with Phil Walker, to be followed by Crucito Herrera Cruz.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, and members of the City Council. An item, front page of the news press, caught my interest yesterday, piqued my interest. And I look at it as the State Water Resources Control Board is sort of abdicating some responsibility and totality. They're leaving up to the discretion of the individual agencies and districts to possibly assign water budgets, indoor water budgets. And, you know, to do it right, you'd have to put in outdoor water meters and separate the indoor and outdoor use. And in that vein, I'd sort of characterize the city of Santa Monica as becoming sort of slanting toward the People's Republic of Santa Monica. They're actually talking about using satellite imagery to get an idea and aerial photography of your landscape. I got a real problem with that. Until you get on the ground, stick your thumb in the soil, you really can't get a good idea of the dryness or wetness of the particular landscape. And, you know, it's overwhelming. What's next? Drones, infrared imaging, thermal imaging of your yard. And it's just being taken too far. So make it a little easier, and if it gets that bad, I'm all for the desal plant, incorporating Montecito and Goleta into it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council people. In the reflection, I'm here just to bring light that there is a judicial matter in civil court concerning California Voting Rights Act, Election Code 14,025, and then some. We're talking about the constitutional principles of the United States, due process clause, and equal protection clause. You both all swore on this dais to sworn allegiance and constitution principles to the flag and to the laws of federalism with state. Both of the constitutions, both at the state level and at the federal level, protect us under California Voting Rights Act. Because of vote dilution and the historical racialized polarized voting, the disequity of the reflection of the population is not reflective of this dais. Thus, there's this equity of political power in our community. The only solution is district-based elections, a 6-1 model. Again, hopefully that would be in the remedy stage where we judicially decide that. Case number 1468167. Why? We've all understand that the east side of Santa Barbara and the west side of Santa Barbara has been marginalized historically, underserved, underrepresented. Hopefully, we have a new paradigm shift and start focusing on our communities. With this new 5-year plan coming down the pipeline through the Community Health Development block grant through the city, hopefully with these revenues that are coming in, we can actually up the ante to the community human services aspect instead of it trickling down each year. Muchas gracias a todos que están escuchando. Por favor, entiende que tenemos un caso pendiente contra la ciudad de Santa Bárbara por violando los derechos del California Voting Rights Act. Votan, vote. It's an American thing.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Did you have a speaker slip? Ethan, why don't you come on up? Yep, go ahead. Come on up, Ethan.
Mayor, City Council. My name is Ethan Schenkman. Indigent outreach observed in local parks like Alameda and Del Mar are currently observed to host casual meals to anyone in the park. Doctors Without Walls are funded to support epidemics commonly found in climates of disparity with county and source financing combined. The Vulnerability Index, C3H, under Jeff Schaefer, have demonstrated mixed messages, however, when small children, ages anywhere from 7 to 9, most susceptible to contamination and communicable diseases, are participating in these events. The public find this to serve as child endangerment and ask more oversight and quality assurance than this level of discernment that could otherwise spread through our schools, families, and throughout neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. We're on to the consent calendar, and you have some items to read.
Item number 2, adoption of ordinance for amendment to Mercury Air Center Santa Barbara Incorporated fuel storage facility lease, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only. An ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute an amendment to agreement number 19,528 dated April 15th, 1999 between Mercury Air Center Santa Barbara Incorporated, doing business as Atlanta Aviation, a California corporation, and the City of Santa Barbara for operation of a fuel storage facility, amending Title V, Rent B1 and 2 to allow the collection of fuel flowage fees for fuel dispensed to commercial air carriers at the Santa Barbara Airport. Item number 3, adoption of ordinance for amendment to Signature Flight Support Corporation fuel storage facility lease, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving and authorizing the airport director to execute an amendment of agreement number 18,538 dated March 14, 1997, between Signature Flight Support Corporation, a Delaware corporation, and the City of Santa Barbara for operation of a fuel storage facility, amending Article 6, Rent B1 and D to allow for the collection of fuel flowage fees for fuel dispensed to commercial air carriers at the Santa Barbara Airport. Item number 4, adoption of ordinance for assignment and amendment to the power purchase agreement for cogeneration project, recommending that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the city administrator to execute a first amendment to the power purchase agreement, city agreement number 23,630, between the City of Santa Barbara and the California Power Partners Incorporated to extend the term of the agreement to July 1, 2024, and further clarify Section 8.4 of the agreement and authorize the city administrator to consent to the assignment of agreement number 23,630 as amended from California Power Partners Incorporated to California Power Partners Santa Barbara, LLC.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Does anything need to be taken off the consent calendar, or is there a motion to approve it? Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Great. On to item number 10. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I share an interest in a home that in the county which has been rented on a short-term basis occasionally, so I'm going to not participate in this item on that basis.
Okay. Adios.
I need to read the item. Item number 10, public meeting on the proposed renewal of the Santa Barbara South Coast Tourism Business Improvement District.
Okay. So we go to Ms. Janega Dykes, or hello. Thank you. Why don't you? Yes. Sorry, Ms. Wilson.
Bet.
Thank you.
Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Jeannie Wilson, and I'm the Treasury Manager here at the City. And I'd like to provide a brief background of the Santa Barbara South Coast Business Improvement District and the renewal process. And thereafter, Kathy Janega Dykes, our CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, will also provide a presentation on the district's activities and the renewal that they're proposing. The district was originally formed in September of 2010 and was for a 5-year term, commencing on January 2011. It did include the cities of Santa Barbara, Goleta, Carpinteria, and the County of Santa Barbara. It is a voluntary assessment on lodging establishments for marketing and advertising for the region, and it was set at a flat rate of a range of 50 cents to $2 based on average daily room rate. The district budget of $1.7 million is administered by Visit Santa Barbara, and they do provide the City Council with an annual report each year. The district currently is comprised of 81 hotels and does not include vacation rentals. On July 29th, a resolution requesting consent from the other jurisdictions within the district was adopted by the City Council. The County of Santa Barbara, the City of Goleta granted consent on September 2nd. The City of Carpinteria did not grant consent at their meeting of September 22nd. Visit Santa Barbara submitted petitions of support, currently at 68%. Council adopted a resolution of intention to renew the district on September 9th. District notices were provided to all hotels and vacation rentals within the district on September 12th. And the purpose of today's meeting is to hear comments, and no council action is required. A public hearing is also set for October 28th, where final renewal will be approved or can be approved if no written protest of more than 50% are received. This renewal district would be effective January 1st, 2015 for a 6-year term. In addition, a management district plan would also be approved at that same meeting. Again, Kathy, CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, will provide an overview of the marketing efforts from this district and the proposed changes to the renewal.
Thank you. So, Ms. Janega Dykes.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Kathy Janega Dykes. I'm the CEO of Visit Santa Barbara, and I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes talking about our T-bid renewal process, why it's important to the city of Santa Barbara and its surrounding communities. I want to review the progress of the current South Coast Tourism Business Improvement District, which I'll refer to as T-bid throughout the presentation, which has been in operation since 2011. We're also going to cover the key points in the proposed renewal of the T-bid plan to take effect in January of 2015. And I certainly want to spend more time talking about the benefits that our lodging community has seen since this district has been formed. And it's important to note that the lodging industry is proposing has really been a collaborative process. We have really spent a lot of time with the general managers and owners of our lodging businesses through a countless number of meetings. We have held focus groups, we have held community meetings, we have held one-on-one meetings, email communication, and not only throughout the South Coast, but specific to Santa Barbara. And the consensus we have reached has included certainly a lot of these has certainly been to this point. We have listened to the members of the lodging community, and we actually even halted the process several months ago so that we could make some modifications to the T-bid assessment model and make some changes to the rates as well as the categories, and so that we felt it was more fair and equitable to all. The South Coast T-bid, by all measures, has really been a marketing and financial success for all of our hotels and the tourism industry. It has funded a strong and very successful tourism marketing effort managed by our organization, Visit Santa Barbara. And this new T-bid proposal, it really is the combination, the leveraging of our public funding, our private funding that's generated through membership revenues, through cooperative revenues, and through certainly the T-bid funds that gives us the additional money that allows us to market with real impact to generate the midweek off-peak season business, which has been really a long-time objective of this community. And I'll highlight that point again throughout the whole presentation. It takes more money to reach a different audience, to bring in more business during that particular time period. And the renewed T-bid generates the funds we need to succeed in this one effort, and one that is a true challenge. So today I'm going to give you a detailed report on the importance of tourism. We'll talk a little bit about who is voting, the return on investment, a model that we built to really measure the incremental room nights that have been generated by the T-bid, and then the proposed changes as well, too. So we all here are aware of the importance of tourism to our community. It is a major part of the local economy, well managed and certainly supported by the leaders and stakeholders in our city. And the return to the community's investment is very significant, obviously, as you can see, 6.2 million visitors annually, $45.8 million in tax revenues, $1.5 billion in visitor-related spending, and 12,000 tourism-supported jobs. And here's really what we strive to do as Visit Santa Barbara. Position Santa Barbara South Coast as a premier destination. Open new markets to fill off-peak seasons. Again, I referenced that early. It's not about filling in during the summer season when we're very busy already. It's really bringing in new business during the times when we need that business, staying ahead of the competition. And the competition is quite fierce out there as well. Increasing profits for the lodging industry, and increased midweek length of stay. We all realize that our weekends are very strong in Santa Barbara, not only during the summer, but also during the fall and the spring season. How can we try to bring more of that midweek business? While each of you are familiar with the Tourism Business Improvement District, I thought it would be important to also, for the public, define the TBID. It's a lodging community self-assessment that generates tourism promotion funds to augment efforts of the Santa Barbara South Coast. It was created by the lodging industry, and it's voted by the lodging industry. And it generates the funds and leverages the dollars to create efficient marketing programs. We are required to receive a 50 plus 1% vote by the lodging industry in the South Coast. The votes are actually weighted by the lodging business's revenues, and I'm happy to say that to date, 29 hotels have signed the petitions, representing over 68% of the support. When we first created the TBID, it was critical for us in the lodging industry to develop measurement tools to track our efforts. We are a marketing agency. How can we demonstrate that we'll be able to generate incremental room nights with these additional funds? So how do we give absolute consideration to every TBID dollar spent, ensuring that the funds are always maximized on behalf of our lodging industry? And in fact, the return on investment from the TBID has been measured, and it has been impressive. And the next several slides give you varieties of ways that we judge our marketing performance. And there are really three different ways to measure this. And the first are what we call destination performance indicators. And these, of course, are the indicators that all of us combine that have generated the increased transient occupancy taxes, the increases in occupancy, and certainly the increases in the average daily rate. And I say this combined because it includes all of you on the dais who are responsible for keeping this community beautiful and making sure that the infrastructure is in place. It's the lodging industry and the attractions who are also responsible for marketing this community to make sure that people keep coming back, and also Visit Santa Barbara to make sure that we're always ahead of the game. But we can't take sole credit for all of these numbers here. But we also have a second way that we measure all of our programs. In fact, this is a slide of a dashboard that we built. This is a dashboard that essentially measures all of our marketing programs. We literally, and I'm not exaggerating, have hundreds of metrics that we measure on a daily basis, and they're tracked on this dashboard. And with ongoing review, we're able to increase or decrease our marketing initiatives and use alternatives in response to each action's effectiveness. This is another way that we're able to see immediately whether the programs are working or not. Again, measuring each of the programs. But the previous slides that I just presented really represent tourism indicators. So what's important to you and our stakeholders is the return on investment on the TBID funding, and how are we working with the lodging community to generate incremental funding. So to do so, we actually contracted a third party to develop an ROI model. And we needed to also conduct some research. Since TBID funds were added to the marketing effort, unique website visitors to the website have grown about over 100%, an increase that directly leads to increased lodging revenue. How does this translate into revenue? Well, based on the research and our work with the lodging community, it's estimated that 10% of desktop users and 9% of mobile users who visit the Visit Santa Barbara website are influenced to visit the destination. The study also allows us to predict with assurance that 10% of those visitors have been persuaded by Visit Santa Barbara marketing efforts. So while we know that 50% of those visitors that come to the website actually travel to the destination, we know that 10% of those are actually influenced by our marketing efforts as well. So conservatively, we're able to measure those numbers. This slide also shows Visit Santa Barbara base year of website activity. So during the 10-11 year, the destination generated $217 million in lodging revenue, of which it's estimated Visit Santa Barbara generated $28 million of 13.3%. And then if we fast forward to our most recent fiscal year, where the destination estimated to have generated $280 million in lodging revenue, of which Visit Santa Barbara generated $59 million, which was 21% of total lodging revenue. So I think it's also, this is a way that we're able to, again, demonstrate that we are able to see additional room nights booked. And I think the bottom line is the return on investment at 13 to $1 really sums it up. So as was mentioned in the previous slide, we've been able to increase the lodging revenue from $28 million to $59 million. And the TBID funds have really further expanded the Visit Santa Barbara efforts and the resources allowing Visit Santa Barbara to initiate a comprehensive marketing effort and extensive sales and public relations activity. And with our renewed funding, we'll be able to take that to a different level. And this slide is of a concern for us. And again, we reference the competition to us because it's really important to note that that our community, while as beautiful as it is, there are other communities that are building their resort infrastructure and are spending more money promoting their communities. For us, it's important to see how much money they're spending in their community. And this gives us an indication of how much they're spending and how much their assessment rates are. So now let's move forward to the renewal process. And as you can see, we are making some recommendations to the assessment categories. If you take a look at the left side, we have our current TBID assessment rate model. And we have 4 different categories ranging from 50 cents to $2. Our proposed TBID assessment model now changes just modestly from 75 cents to $4, increasing from 4 categories to 6 categories. The other change that we are also proposing is that vacation rentals will now be assessed on a per-unit basis at the rate of $2 per night. Why? Because our attorney is recommending that anyone who benefits from tourism promotion should also be paying the TBID assessment as well, too. And we know that there is demand for vacation rentals because there has been certainly an increased number of vacation rentals that have been made available in this marketplace. The other change that we're making to this model is adding what we call an escalator clause. So this is more or less a CPI increase. And in year 3 and 5, we're proposing that there will also be some nominal increases to the assessment rates. And what's important to note is that the Board of Directors of Visit Santa Barbara has the authority to veto that in the event that we feel that the community could not support those increases in year 3 and year 5. And then those same escalator clauses would also apply to the vacation rentals. The total budget for the hotels, motels, inns, including the vacation rentals, as you can see for the first couple of years, would be close to $3 million. By year 6, we're looking at $3.5 million. So our current district right now includes Santa Barbara, the South Coast, Santa Barbara County, Carpinteria, and Goleta. It's a 5-year term, generated about $1.7 million, and businesses over 4 rooms are assessed. The renewed district would include Santa Barbara County, South Coast, and Goleta only, a 6-year term. Budget for the first year would be close to $3 million, and the assessment would be applied to all lodging businesses. The opportunities for growth. And again, we need to really take a look at how do we plan to use these dollars. And in order to really take a look at this we've put together a 5-year strategic marketing plan. And this plan really is an integrated plan using all communication channels to really promote all levels of lodging businesses, from budget to luxury, from small to large. And these initiatives that summarize some of the programs that we will be implementing to really generate new business for all categories of all properties. And I think that it is important to note that all businesses do benefit from this. And we've been able to put together a diverse marketing strategy that would benefit some of the smaller properties as well as the larger resorts. As I'd mentioned at the beginning, we're here to build new business, generate new room nights for the community, particularly building new business during the winter period, the first and the fourth quarters certainly being the most important. And really, the bottom line is we're looking at extending stays, generating higher midweek business, and generating a higher ADR. And that summarizes the TBID renewal process. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where do you anticipate using these additional funds for marketing?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Hotchkiss, we actually have a number of different marketing channels that would be used. So, for example, we right now spend about $1 million in a paid advertising program. We would be increasing that campaign, but we would be changing the strategy slightly so that we would be focusing more further afield so that we could generate more business, attracting more people that would travel to Santa Barbara during the winter period. Looking at, let's say, the East Coast, when people are, certainly suffering from the snowstorms or things like that, or bringing more of the snowbirds down during the winter period. A lot of that money would also be spent on our social media campaigns, international outreach. Right now we have actually one representation company in the UK looking at expanding that. When you look at emerging markets such as China or Brazil, there are opportunities to really capture some of that international business that is coming that way. We also are proposing to develop a campaign to highlight some of our smaller inns, because when you look at certainly our hotel or lodging inventory, most of our hotels are lodging or inventory is made up of the smaller inns. Looking at a campaign that specifically focuses on the smaller inns. We're also looking at increasing our marketing efforts for bringing in new film production to the area. So really looking at, elevating each of our marketing programs across the board.
So to some degree is the idea that if they have to come farther, they'll stay here longer?
And spend more money.
Well, of course. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, the point of this is to have a public hearing, so let's have the public hearing. If I'll call your name up, Matthew Levine will be first, followed by Tom Patton. And you have 2 minutes up at the podium.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Matthew Levine. I'm the general manager at the Vest Parker. Good to see you all. Cassie stole all my thunder, so I'm going to redo my speech now. Thanks, Kathy. No. But first of all, I really want to thank you all for your support for Visit Santa Barbara's agency. I appreciate the increase in the budget this year. That shows me that your commitment to tourism here for Santa Barbara. So really thank you for all that. I'm here really to support the amended TBID. There are currently 85 cities in California that have TBIDs, and they're all trying to attract tourism to their cities. It is critical that we stay competitive and not let our funding fall behind. Our city needs to remain top of mind at state, national, and global levels. This takes money that will continue to grow our hotel revenues and, in turn, the local economy. By passing this amended T-bid, we will have the funds to do so. Thank you, and I look for your continued support in approving this T-bid.
Tom Patton will be followed by Andrew Firestone.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schneider and fellow council members. As Kathy said, this really has been an inclusive process. For those of you that were on the dais the first go-around, you'll know that it was a 3-year process that we took to make sure that we reached out to the large and small properties alike and came up with a unique model that wasn't being in place anywhere else in the state of California, with the different tiers and the dollar amounts, and we tweaked that to make sure everybody would be represented. As Kathy said, we started the process again. We were going to double the assessment to make it competitive with some of our other major destinations. We heard feedback from some of the other properties here that said the increase was too much. Maybe the higher ADR properties should be paying more. We added 2 additional assessment tiers, dialed down the increase by 50%. And so, again, it's very nominal. And, again, everybody's had an opportunity for input. We've listened. We've really done our homework and really tried to be diligent in that. We've included vacation rentals. As Kathy said, clearly they benefit. They need to be participating. I tell you, we need to make sure that everybody is part of this. We're renewing 1 year early just to make sure that funding stream continues uninterrupted. The last thing that we would want is that T-bid money to go away and not be able to promote Santa Barbara at the level that we're doing that right now. As Matthew said, we've got a lot of competition both in-state and out-of-state. The goal of our T-bid is to drive overnight hotel stays. Our restaurants and shopping going to benefit as a side. Of course, nobody comes just to stay at a hotel. They shop, they eat, they enjoy our city. But the goal is to drive overnight hotel stays, and that's what we've done very successfully. The assessment is paid by the guest, not by the hotel. Therefore, it's not a financial hardship to the hotels. As Kathy said, we wanted to drive demand in the off-season and slower peaks times. We don't necessarily want more people during the summer, but we want them during the times that we need them. And we appreciate the public-private partnership that we've had with you and look forward to continuing that.
Got 2 minutes to the second. That was
perfect.
Good. Thank you. Andrew Firestone and Scott Perry, you're waving your... Scott Perry here? Yeah, you're waving your 2 minutes. So, Mr. Firestone, you have up to 4 minutes.
4 minutes?
Yeah, you
in
can.
A row?
In a row. And you have, and
Hold
Paul
on.
Bullock will be after you.
Right. Thank you for listening today, and thank you to Kathy and her team for all the work that they do. They do work hard on behalf of Visit Santa Barbara. I'm actually here because I don't know why we're doing this a year early, and I don't know why we're talking about a renewal/increase and not just a renewal. And I think that if you saw all of these amazing slides and the growth that we've seen in Santa Barbara, it seems like they're doing a pretty good job with the rate metric that they have in front of them. Why is it that we need to increase by 50%? One thing I want to point out, and I didn't realize this, but there was 68.8%, I think, of approval for this resolution, with only 29 of the hotels responding. There's 81 hotels in this district, so that would tell me that there's 52 hotels that are opposed to it. Unfortunately, it's a weighted voting system, and some of the hotels that are supporting this have a heck of a lot more weight than I do. I mean, to the tune of like 10 times more voting power than I have. Even if I were to have voiced my opinion, it wouldn't have mattered because I get outvoted. The reason that those big hotels, and I get it, they have a lot of rooms to fill, 300-plus rooms for some of the bigger hotels. I don't have that many. I have 70 rooms to fill. So I don't benefit from big groups, organizations, all these things that Kathy's working so hard to get in, which is great for Santa Barbara, doesn't help some of the smaller hotels that are here today. So I think that there should be some solutions, and I'll bring this up at the end because I'm going to take my whole time since I have it. So the nice thing about what they put together is that if they do their job, their budget will increase organically. The more people that visit Santa Barbara, the more people that are paying the overnight rate, the more money that they get. So if they're successful at what they do, they get the benefit of it, their budget increases. What worries me is that we are in a windfall year in hospitality, not in Santa Barbara, but in the entire country. And we're coming out, and these numbers increases come out of 2010, 2011, which, as we all know, was the absolute basement for hospitality, actually for economically. So if we're starting to rate that year by year by year, there was just organic growth. I appreciate the work that Kathy and her team do, but it was a rising tide that was floating a lot of ships anyway. If we, in this year, set the mark for a budget going forward, we're setting a dangerous precedent, and I'm sure that the councilmen and women sitting here today know what it's like. If you set a budget in a banner year, when you don't have a banner year, you have to support that budget regardless. And my worry is that we're going to see this increased budget, overhead's going to increase, but maybe we have a slow year. We have a 2008, we have a 2009, and we can no longer support that budget. So I don't want to just be pessimistic here. I want to offer solutions, and Kathy was referring earlier to how we work together. So one thing is that the quote from the lawyer was that anyone who benefits from tourism promotion should pay. However, it's only hotels that are paying, and there are a lot of other groups. Why not include other groups to also contribute to the TBIT? That was one. Number two, the city of Santa Barbara has gotten a record amount of TOT tax. Last year, the year before, record-setting. So if you think that's so important, I would recommend that you even increase your participation even more. Thirdly, why not just do this renewal with an option to keep it at the existing rates? Why is it either keep it and increase it, or it's just gone? I think we should keep it, but I think we need to make sure that we're understanding that some of the smaller hotels like ours, like other ones that are represented, like the 52 others that are not in that 68% approval, should have a voice as well. I thank you to Kathy and all her team. They've been great and responsive to us, but please consider the fact that this may not be a time to increase the rates by 50%. Thank you.
Paul Bullock will be followed by Detty Thompson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for hearing us. My name is Paul Bullock. I'm the general manager of the Eagle Inn. We're a small hotel in West Beach. We have under 35 rooms. And I support this new TBID model. And I feel that our hotel and the whole town benefits from the work that the Visit Santa Barbara crew does. And I would strongly suggest that we allow this new TBID to go into effect. Thank you.
I said Detty, but I think it's Deet. Or yes, please correct me. And followed by Karen Earp.
Hello, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Diet Thompson, and my husband and I own a vacation rental, one rental. It is a one-bedroom apartment that is part of our home. We would oppose that this organization be expanded to include vacation rentals. We don't need it. It's superfluous. We don't benefit from it. Right in the flyer that came out from Visit Santa Barbara, it says here, tourist homes, houses, apartment houses, mobile homes, house trailers, vacation rentals are assessed at a per unit basis of $2 per night. Right there, it's unfair because sometimes if we looked above, our rate wouldn't be $2 a night. All these properties will benefit from the destination marketing designed to increase overnight visitation and resulting hotel compression. They will not be listed on the website or in promotional materials, or be featured in a co-op film of advertising, or receive direct sales leads as a result of the TBID efforts. So why on earth would we want to be part of this when we're not going to be listed or benefit in any way, shape, or form? They talk about increasing their off-season rentals. Our rental from January 1st to September 1st this year was 94% occupancy. A lot of our visitors come from foreign countries. They find us on that international website. It has no effect what this organization does to us. Santa Barbara has been on the map as a tourist destination for well over 100 years. You travel any place in the world and somebody asks you, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Santa Barbara. I don't have to say California or USA. They know where Santa Barbara is. It's amazing. I could give you a long list of why it's known. Pardon?
You're over your time, so if you could just wind up.
I would recommend that this not be renewed, and at the very least, it not be expanded to the little guy, which I represent. Thank you.
Karen Earp will be followed by Kay Mortar.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and the City Council. I'm Karen Earp, the General Manager of the Four Seasons Resort Santa Barbara. I am in support of the new TBID assessment, and I feel very strongly about underscoring the importance of staying ahead of the competition. We have 85 TBID projects in California, and we do believe, I think, to remain competitive, feel that we need more funding. Other communities, such as Newport Beach and Monterey, have larger marketing budgets than us. One of our key successes we've had is the way that we've been able to leverage the TBID funds with our city funds to extend our outreach and increase efficiencies. I think Visit Santa Barbara, having worked in many countries around the world, do a superb job at marketing the destination and help us, Santa Barbara, remain top of mind, both at a state, national, and also global level. And I truly believe, having seen the successes of this year and the past 5 years, that Visit Santa Barbara and the TBID has contributed to rising visitation numbers, resulting in a very positive economic impact for Santa Barbara. The increase that's being proposed, I think, will have a minimal effect on any consumer decision to visit the destination. These fees are pervasive throughout California, and the sum total of our assessment is considerably lower than most. When I look back at this year, just in this token year of the collaboration we've had with Visit Santa Barbara and how this funding contributed by the TBID has helped us as a business, we actually were successful with the bachelor wedding. We worked very closely with Visit Santa Barbara, and they provided great support to bring back further filming. Upcoming Epicure Santa Barbara, we're doing a new promotion with Sideways, which for the 10-year anniversary, which I think the whole of Santa Barbara will benefit from. I truly hope that you support this new proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Kay Mortar will be followed by Richard Yates.
Madam Mayor and council members, I'm Kay Mortar, and I'm the Managing Director of the Santa Barbara Hotel Group. I'm speaking for the Best Western Plus Pepper Tree Inn, the Encina Inn and Suites, as well as the Brisas Del Mar, the Inn by the Harbor, and the Lavender Inn, a total of 368 guest rooms. I mention the number of guest rooms because we're a major stakeholder here in the Santa Barbara hotel market. Santa Barbara has changed over the years. It's gone from an artistic but sleepy town to a major tourist destination. We have first-class resorts here, such as the Bacara, the Canary, the El Encano, and the Biltmore, as well as a major convention property in the Fess Parker Doubletree. Santa Barbara represents many hotel brands, from the small independent to IHG, Best Western, Hilton, Marriott, Four Seasons, and more. With all these changes in Santa Barbara, our Visit Santa Barbara has changed also. As separate hotels, we could never achieve the marketing presence that Visit Santa Barbara gives us. From advertising to trade shows, from films to television, from their work with foreign markets, meeting planners, bus tours, corporations, sponsorships, fam tours, travel agents, websites, and destination marketing, Visit Santa Barbara does it all. They've been able to expand their staff and their marketing dollars with the TBID that we all instituted. This is a valuable tool to our hotel industry as well as to the city of Santa Barbara. I think that Visit Santa Barbara has been very responsive to the concerns of the group opposing the expansion and continuation of the TBID, and I think that this current proposal is a very good compromise. I support Visit Santa Barbara and the current TBID proposal. Thank you.
Richard Yates will be followed by James Finkner.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. Thanks for having this hearing today. I'm Richard Yates from Opal Restaurant and Bar. Some of us know each other, I think. And in the interest of transparency, I'll say I'm a restaurateur on the board of Visit Santa Barbara. And not being a hotelier, I get a pretty good objective close-up on how much this group does bring to Santa Barbara and benefits our business. I have to say they have a phenomenally creative group of people working for them whose acumen directly translates to bringing business our way. One example is the Epicure promotion, which is going to start tomorrow. And it's kind of interesting. You could just do it the same way every year, but they always change something. And it's really hard to keep up with them, actually, to be honest with you. They do a really good job. and every year challenge us to come up with things that make this particular promotion is very good because it not only helps locals by being changing every year, but it helps visitors who come from not that far away to feel there's something fresh going on. Another example is the film festival promotion, which also benefits restaurants in town. And Santa Barbara being a beautiful place to live, there's no heavy industry here to speak of. We benefit from tourism as a way to keep this beautiful, clean place, a place we like to live. And I think it's indisputable that the hospitality industry is a huge part of what makes Santa Barbara great. We're arguably the destination between Los Angeles and San Francisco, but without the support of being right next to a centralized, huge metropolitan area. And so therefore also without the access to resources that enable us to compete with areas like Santa Monica, Monterey, et cetera. So we feel that it's very important that we understand that we have competition from these areas which have greater resources. And the TBID expansion and continuation, which is proposed, just barely lets us keep up, as far as I can tell, with what other competing destinations would do. I think it's really important for all of Santa Barbara that we continue to support the TBID program and its expansion.
You wind up, please.
Are we there?
Yep. you're
Okay.
there. There's a clock right there, just so everyone knows.
Anyway, I support the proposal to expand and continue the TBID. Thank you.
Thank you. James Fechner and Tatiana, are you here? Yeah, there you are, and you're giving your 2 minutes to James. Okay, and then Michael Cohen will be after, so you have up to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. My name is James Fechner, and my wife, Tatiana, and I own some vacation rentals here in Santa Barbara. So I decided to comb my hair, put on a suit, and come down to talk about this, which I think is particularly flawed. Now, you may sense that there's a love fest going on with those that own big hotels. I can understand that. What we do in terms of vacation rentals, we have absolutely no benefit from this website or its made-up ROI. We pay private companies to do our marketing. We're extremely happy with that. We'd like to continue that. I think one of the misconceptions here is, obviously, in Santa Barbara, the travel here is very important, but it's already on millions of people's bucket list. I think if we're going to concentrate our resources, I would strongly suggest that we look at the experience while people are here. We've had a number of complaints from our guests in terms of the aggressive panhandling, these types of things. And money is scarce. I think there's things we can do from our perspective. This absolutely does not benefit us. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael Cohen will be followed by Theodora Stefan, and then Ethan Shankman will be the final speaker.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Cohen. I am here in support of the proposed TBID renewal. I operate Santa Barbara Adventure Company. We host about 12,000 people a year. We do a variety of types of trips, from tours to school groups to corporate team building programs. I employ about 30 people, all of whom pay local taxes and are able to survive here in lovely Santa Barbara. I have been in close partnership with Visit Santa Barbara for my whole time as a business owner here, and I've seen the direct benefits of the TBID funding. I'm aware of Kathy's plans, and I've been close in the marketing plan. But one thing that stands out to me is how hampered they were before they had this TBID funding, and how well they've used this money to really help small businesses like mine to grow in light of this additional funding. One thing we've seen with them in their close partnership is this increased web placement, search, SEO placement, and media placement. Several TV shows here come. I'm doing a proposal for a TV show right now. We get one about every 6 months. They love our city as a backdrop, and they really are. The main conduit for that is Visit Santa Barbara. They have a very strong marketing plan. It's enviable by any organization like theirs. In fact, they're very closely tied to Visit California, which is regularly handing out awards and accolades to Visit Santa Barbara for their accomplishments. I would say very notably their social media presence is enviable for organizations with much higher revenues, such as Los Angeles. We need to keep this. The last thing, some of the things I wanted to let you guys know is we need to keep an increasingly competitive edge with the growing markets down in Southern California. And I want to tell you that I strongly support this T-bid, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Theodora Stefan.
Mayor Schneider and City Council members, thank you for the opportunity. I own an agritourism business in North County in Los Olivos, Global Gardens. I'm an organic olive oil producer. I'm also on the board of Visit Santa Barbara, and I do support the T-bid. I do have also a vacation rental under construction on my 3 acres, and the work that Visit Santa Barbara does from a marketing standpoint, the growth of the T-bid, again, echoing one of my colleagues from the Four Seasons in saying that it's, even with the growth of the additional dollars, it's still far less than other communities who we're in competition with are collecting. And as far as my own personal small business and vacation rental goes, Visit Santa Barbara is a huge, the marketing endeavor is huge for me, because when we ask every customer who comes in the door where they're staying, where they're coming from, invariably they're on a day trip to the Santa Ynez Valley, they're staying in Santa Barbara, and they're staying extra days, and they're spending their dollars touring wine country and the other, as I said, agricultural opportunities that we have up there to offer them. And without this umbrella organization doing a splash on Santa Barbara as a whole, I don't see them using the T-bid dollars just to promote hotels at all. And having my own vacation rental and my own small business, I see a direct reflection of those T-bid slash marketing dollars coming to me as a small business person with a small business that's growing. So I'm here to encourage you to vote in acceptance of the proposed and proactive additional T-bid. Thank you.
Ethan Shankman.
I have to read this from my iPhone. Okay. As native born to the local area region, it has always been considered how theme specific to Santa Barbara notes to a story about a child who was executed by sanction due process over an idea. As measure of class, it would be kind to address the distinction of genre from other locations in California, similar to modern contemporary Anne Frank, under the Nazi Holocaust movement within a global perspective. Measure exists to support the reverence. Measure exists to support the reverence to the Barbara story, which I will be submitting this year to Kathy by me to meet this conundrum, where leisure luxury resort destination might be reinforced for the demand of intellectual thinking minds in order to increase revenues and business while still limiting congestion and demand, as well as eliminating disparity commonly seen downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public comment. This is one of those things we don't get to vote on. You do, or the people involved with the T-bid. So any questions or anything before Ms. Murillo?
May I ask Ms. Janega Dykes to come up, and if you would address some of the criticisms that people have put out. How do vacation rentals benefit and smaller hotels? And then why renewing early? Those questions, please.
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Murillo, let me first begin by addressing your first question, which is how do the smaller hotels benefit? That was one of your questions. How the vacation rentals benefit? So when we are marketing Santa Barbara as a whole, and I think I heard this a lot from some of the owners of the vacation rentals, yes, Santa Barbara is known throughout the world. But there is a reason why the community is known. It takes marketing for that community to be known. Otherwise, people would not be aware of this. And in fact, we spend a great deal of money marketing Santa Barbara to the international markets. I have staff that just came back from Australia who are promoting Santa Barbara down in New Zealand and Australia. I have staff that's going out to London. In fact, the movie Sideways will be featured at a VIP event for travel trade and also for media at that event as well. We have representation in London. We did have representation in France and also in Australia as well too. So it's important for us to be able to spend spend money marketing Santa Barbara in order to for all of the businesses to certainly benefit. So our vacation rental owners certainly benefit from the international visitation that we see, but also just from our domestic visitors. People need to know they come to Santa Barbara because it's Santa Barbara. There are a lot of other choices that they have, and it's important to keep that Santa Barbara name out there. So they truly benefit from the names out there. Their assessment is lower, which is why they are not receiving as many benefits. The original proposal was that they were going to pay actually a significantly higher assessment, and then they would receive more benefits. But we thought that this would be certainly a better, opportunity for them to pay a lower rate and then benefit from all of the brand marketing that is done on behalf of the community. In response to the question about the lodging or the smaller properties, everyone benefits. So we just responded to the vacation rentals. But we really take a look. When we put our marketing programs together, we actually start our process with a series of marketing workshops. So there's a community-based marketing plan development process where we invite small and large hotels, we invite attractions, we invite restaurants. And we ask everyone to provide their point of view on how we should be marketing the community. And we ask the smaller hotels as well as the larger resorts what programs would be best for them and develop a plan that we feel is well-rounded and certainly meets the needs of everyone. And I think you had a third question there, too.
It was about why renew early?
Yes, and that we are renewing early at the advice of our attorney, and I think Tom Patton addressed that as well, too. So in order to keep the assessment going, we wanted to make sure that we do renew early, and we always knew that once we went through the renewal process, that the assessment would be increased as well too. When we launched this T-bid about 3.5 years ago, close to 4 years right now, we started off at probably the lowest rate in the state of California, which is a little ironic because our lodging businesses probably have one of the highest ADRs in the state. So we always knew that when we renewed that the assessment would also be modified as well too. But our attorney is advising all communities who are going through the renewal process to begin at least a year early to make sure that there is not any interruption of the service and of the T-bid renewal process.
Thank you.
We have some other lights on. Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do the vacation rental owners have a vote in this?
Madam Mayor, yes. Councilmember Francisco, yes, absolutely. So the city of...
It's to Mr. Nagendijk. So
yes, and actually, I'd like to invite Cheryl Cummings of Civitas to come up to the podium. Civitas is our attorney that actually is representing our organization, and they also oversee a number of these T-bids throughout the state. Cheryl?
Thank you. Yes, so the process is actually for the 94 Act T-bid is through a petition process to show support. So when Mr. Firestone mentioned earlier that 52 hotels are opposing this T-bid, I want to be clear that, Jeannie, how many protest letters have you received to date?
To date, there have been approximately a dozen. Most of those are with the city of Carpinteria.
Okay. So please keep in mind that those that have submitted protest letters are those that have verbalized their opposition to this, and those 68% of folks that do have a weighted vote in this renewal process have said on a signed petition that they are willing to support this effort. So the vacation rentals, as do all other participants, constituents in this group, have an opportunity to either submit a protest or sign a petition in support.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was that all your questions?
That's it.
Okay. Mr.
Thank
Hart?
And just to clarify our role, today we're just taking public comments, and folks are having an opportunity to express their point of view. But really what this is this is a state law that has authorized private enterprise to assess themselves to market their private businesses. And we really kind of just serve as a referee in a sense, having these public forums, having this opportunity for folks to communicate to us. But essentially, the decision is made internal to the organizations that are involved here, the businesses that are involved in here. And I know there has been a tremendous amount of work, collaborative work, amongst folks of different points of view, and that the plan, as it was originally presented some months ago, has changed and evolved to accommodate a lot of those concerns. I know that specifically. I've met with some of the folks who had concerns early on, and I think they should be pleased that the changes, obviously they're not 100% satisfied, but this kind of thing is pretty hard to achieve 100% satisfaction. In politics, a 68% vote is a pretty strong indication of that's a big win. And from my perspective, I think that the process is going along as it's been intended and set forward by the state legislature, and we should just move to the next step.
Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as Mr. Hart pointed out, this is an internal process among the board members, which is fine, and we don't really decide on the rates or the weighting or however that goes. I am still want to be on the record about the vacation rental thing, which makes me a little uncomfortable, only because as we talk about these assessments, we're talking about what I would assume are business license paying businesses, registered businesses, and not just harvested off of the web. And I don't really know, but I certainly don't want to add a tacit approval for any kind of business that's not part of the regular business process. And I'm not assuming anything here. But as we go forward, if somebody says, well, I've paid my T-bid, my assessment for the last 15 years. Clearly, I'm an established business when their neighbors may have a very strong disagreement about that because they're not zoned for it. So I just want to be on the record saying I'm not in love with the idea of the vacation. I can see why revenue-wise your attorney wants to include that, and I can see where that's a fairness issue to the lodging industry. But I also do not want to participate in something that's a shadow industry. Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, the next steps now are what?
The public hearing is scheduled for October 28th, and at that time, you may approve the district without protest votes exceeding 50%. In addition, at that time, you will approve a management district plan, which defines the activities of the district and their budget and their bylaws.
And so those eligible to vote have until that date
until
to
October 28th. So
to submit either a petition or a protest letter.
They can certainly submit protest letters until that point in time.
Okay. So thank you. That concludes this part of the agenda. We'll move on to item number 11.
Planned public outreach for Cliff Drive Traffic Safety Improvements Project.
Mr. Bailey, whenever you're ready. You may want to wait till, if you can take your conversations outside the chambers, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Mayor, City Council, good afternoon. My name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the Public Works Department and the Traffic Engineering Group. I'm here this afternoon to talk about a potential traffic safety project on Cliff Drive. I've got a brief presentation for you this afternoon. We'll talk about the purpose of our visit to you today, some of the background, how we got here, grant opportunity that we have, project description, and as well the planned public engagement. The purpose why we're here today is to request your approval of a public engagement plan for a potential traffic safety project on Cliff Drive. This project has not been vetted in the public yet and is not in the 6-year capital improvement plan project. So it is important that we do present this to the public. Some background. In this past January, the relinquishment of State Route 225 was completed, so the city now owns the road. It used to be a Caltrans facility, now it's city-owned. State Route 225 consisted of a number of streets, Las Positas Road, Cliff Drive, a small section of Montecito Street, and as well a small section of Castillo Street. So what this means is the city is now responsible for operational decisions and as well as maintenance responsibilities for these streets. During the relinquishment process, myself and other city staff members attended a number of neighborhood-sponsored town hall meetings. And what we heard from the public was a desire for traffic safety changes along the corridor. Some of those changes include bike lanes, improved and more frequent pedestrian crossing locations, improved lighting, and a continuous left turn lane. There were other desires as well to do with aesthetics and whatnot, but I'm focused on traffic safety issues. As well, we've been in discussions with Santa Barbara City College over the past few months. They've also expressed a desire for some traffic safety improvements along their frontage. During the relinquishment process, we were quite clear with our message that the city has no funding available for major capital projects. The majority of our funds right now, our streets funds, go towards maintenance of our existing facilities, and we rely heavily upon grant funds in order to make safety improvements. However, we did make a commitment to the community that we would pursue grant opportunities as they came up, including this one here that we're about to talk about. Next spring, we're expecting a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant call for projects. This is federal money. It's administered by Caltrans. And the improvements that are included in the project have to be based on a collision history. And so what that means is when we make an application for a grant under this program, we have to demonstrate that there is a pattern of collisions and that the improvement we're proposing will correct that pattern. And like I said, we expect that call for projects to happen in 2015. This is a competitive grant. There's no guarantee that we would be successful, but based on past experiences, we feel like this would be a well-received project by Caltrans. Some of the other HSIP projects that have been done in the city recently and are upcoming in the near future, the Anacapa and Carrillo Streets Intersection Improvement Project, De La Vina and Figueroa Streets Intersection Improvement Project, and these next three we're expecting to be built this winter and next spring. Some crosswalk enhancements at 5 locations, some traffic signal hardware upgrades, including bigger and brighter LED lenses, countdown timers, and as well the De La Vina and Arriaga new traffic signal that you approved earlier in this meeting. The project description, the funding amount that we think we can get is about $900,000. This program requires a local match of 10%, so that would be about $90,000. Based on the collision patterns that we've analyzed and identified along the corridor, we think we could get a project that would fund bike lanes, so that would make a continuous bike lane facility from Las Positas to Loma Alta, continuous center left turn lane, and as well as a new traffic signal at the Santa Barbara City College West Campus driveway. One thing we heard probably the most strongly in the community meetings that we attended was the community's desire for better pedestrian crossings. And there's a very limited pedestrian-involved collision history on this corridor, so this program isn't the right funding mechanism for pedestrian improvements. We will pursue other grants as they become available to make pedestrian improvements, but it's just not something that we think we can get included with this project. This is a map of the project and some other things that are going on in the vicinity. The dashed line down here shows the restriping that was done between Meigs and Santa Barbara City College in 2011. The solid dark lines are the gaps, so to speak, in the bike lane network that we would be filling in. The large dark dots are either a new traffic signal at Santa Barbara City College West Campus driveway, or as well some traffic signal modifications that we would have to make in order to accommodate bike lanes. Cliff and Las Positas, the design for the roundabout is underway right now. We are expecting to have a public meeting later this year or early next year to show the public our progress. As well, in August, this past August, we received a nearly $1.4 million grant for the planning, environmental, and design of a new separated bike path project along Las Positas Road and Modoc Road. So all these projects fit together, and we are trying to treat them as a system so that they do fit together well. Now, the restriping that would be part of this project is not as straightforward as the restriping that was done in 2011 between Meigs and Santa Barbara City College. The shopping center just west of Meigs has a lot of turning movements happening with it. And as well, there's a complex intersection at Cliff Drive and Mesa Lane, Flora Vista. So there are traffic flow trade-offs associated with this project that we really need the public to understand before we would want to move forward with anything. As well, there would be some parking trade-offs. There'd be a few spots lost in a few places, a few spots gained in a few places, so that would all have to be explained to the public. Our planned community public engagement process would consist of a community meeting. That would be a short presentation, display boards, and as well as staff available for questions. Because this is a road of regional significance, it's a principal arterial street, we recognize that not everybody that lives in the Mesa neighborhood would attend the meeting, and so we would make the presentation available online and ask for comments via a website. This is happening this fall because the grant opportunity is next spring. Moving parallel to this is the Bicycle Master Plan update, and that's not expected to be completed until late 2015. So by that time, the grant opportunity would have passed us by. So that's why we're moving forward with this separately. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I don't see any public comment speaker slips. If you talk to Alice at the Mesa paper, you just might get everyone at the Mesa coming to your meetings. So I'll just put that out there. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sort of a shotgun approach to questions here. The crosswalk enhancements at 5 locations, can you describe those?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, the 5 locations are Anacapa and Cabrillo, so right next to the Fish House and the skate park. The intersection of Upper State and Calle Palo, Colorado, so that's the connection between San Roque and the McKenzie neighborhood. We've got Cabrillo and Corona Del Mar, so East Beach, and as well State Street at Pedregosa and State Street at Islay, so the 2 intersections immediately south of Mission Street. They all include flashers, the pedestrian-activated flashers. The intersections at Calle Palo, Colorado, and Cabrillo and Anacapa also include median refuge islands and curb extensions.
Does that reduce a lane of traffic, the median refuge?
No. They're both T intersections, meaning the minor street only comes in from the north in both cases. So there's a left turn lane on one side of the intersection so that people can turn left to go northbound. Immediately across from that left turn lane is unused pavement, so that's where we would put the median refuge island.
Okay. At the Mesa Flora Vista intersection, you say here that you've got to keep 2 traffic lanes are needed in both directions?
Yes.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's fine. If you'll bear with me here, I've got another graphic I can show you. That's an aerial of the pair of intersections as it exists today. Because they're offset intersections, there's kind of a unique traffic signal sequence that has to happen.
Very well, yeah.
And it really eats into the efficiency of the intersection because you have to serve the 2 side streets separately.
Right.
And it reduces the amount of green time that's available for the major street. So because it's less efficient for the major street, I would recommend maintaining 2 lanes. The downside would be queue lengths of about 500 feet during the peak hours. That's about 20 cars deep. So that would be the downside of going.
Okay, so but as we go west here on Cliff Drive, well, the plan is to reduce those number of lanes?
By the time we get to the roundabout will have one entry and one exit lane. And one entry and one exit lane is lots of capacity for a roundabout. So somewhere between Mesa Lane and the roundabout, there would be a reduction.
Okay, and we've been calling that a left turn, right turn lane, whatever we want to call. But actually from Mesa all the way to Las Positas, I think there's only one opportunity to turn left if you're going west, and none if you're going east, except to go into the school.
There is an entrance to Elings Park, but
Right.
you're right, there are very limited access.
So would there be a better way of using that pavement, is what I'm trying to say?
Right. The continuous center left turn lane would likely be eliminated just somewhere east of this intersection.
Right.
So we would try to maximize use of that.
Just for your consideration, this is a novel thing that I hadn't heard, but a friend has an electric vehicle. And I said, well, that should be great. He said, well, no, because it takes away my refuge lane. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, when he's driving down the street on a 4-lane highway or 2 lanes in each direction, unless he has a place to move over to the right, cars pile up behind him, because he's only doing 20, 25 miles an hour. And this would, you know what I'm talking about, those sort of golf cart looking things?
Golf cart sized?
Yeah.
He technically shouldn't be on this street. Yeah.
Guess I better tell him that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
I think you better
he lives
stop the line of questioning
off of
there,
this
Mr.
street,
Hopkins.
so he's in a real pickle here. Yeah, because he explained to me that he can't move over in the bike lane because then he gets a ticket for being in the bike lane.
Right. Good to know.
Good to know.
Yeah.
I'll relay your message.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I'm glad we're dealing with the City College issue and, of course, the engineering little dream that poses right there. My question is this, is as we look at the desirability of doing the bike lanes continuously all the way through to City College from Las Positas, when we do that in front of the shopping center, as I recall right now, there's 2 lanes each way, a center turn lane, but no bike lanes. Is that correct?
Correct.
And are we going to then lose a center turn lane if we do bike lanes, or how does this configuration go forward?
No, the nice thing about this road and the width that it is that we can maintain the existing number of lanes in this section right here and just narrow the lanes a little bit in order to get enough room on the outside for bike lanes. Caltrans, their standard lane width is 12 feet, whether you're talking about Highway 101 or Arterial Street going through Santa Barbara. So they've left us with 12-foot lanes. That gives us the flexibility to go down to like 10.5 and 11, which is totally appropriate for urban conditions, and that gives us enough room to squeeze in bike lanes on the outside.
Excellent, thank you.
This section right here is a section that, with all the driveway access, a lot of turning movements. I would like to maintain 2 lanes in each direction here. Capacity-wise, the numbers say that 1 lane in each direction would work, but with the number of turning movements, I think maintaining the flexibility.
Well, we had that discussion with the improvements west of Meigs, and we said this probably should remain like this for those very reasons.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So you're asking if we approve this today, the 10%, our 10% match will come later. That's not something that we're talking about now.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Murillo, the 10%, this is likely a 2017 project.
Okay.
So if this does move forward to an actual project, the construction award would have to come before council. What we're asking for today is just your approval to go talk to the community about this, because this hasn't been vetted in the past, and it's not in the 6-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, so we're just approving your staff time to go talk to the community, which is so engaged. I attend Alice's meetings up there, so we're, you're going to get what you're looking for, I think. So if I would like to move approval, but I know other people have other things to say.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Well, I think this will count as one of your first meetings, because I think practically everyone in this room probably lives in this part of the area, right? Especially right around there. Mr. Hart?
I don't actually think it is the first meeting because the Mesa Architects have had a number of meetings, the Mesa Association have had a number of meetings, and every meeting that I've attended, and Mr. Bailey's been at every one of those meetings too, there's been strong support for this planning effort and the ultimate construction of improvements on the road. So I think you're way down the path and just need to kind of check this box. And I think that will help with the grant applications too, having that kind of input from the community. And probably should reference all of these additional meetings that have occurred as part of the consensus building process for that grant application.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, and I just wanted to comment that, or at least ask and then comment that this effort that you're proposing today, and which I do, of course, support, was not possible while this was Highway 225. Is that correct? Isn't that correct?
That's correct. What we're planning to do would be considered substandard for Caltrans. They require things like 12-foot lanes and that sort of thing, whereas we know 10.5 and 11 work fine in the city. So that sort of thing, being under city control, helps facilitate that.
And so this is unplanned. This is and it just came along. And also, Mr. Bailey's coming here and sort of examining the city through your lens and coming up with the various technical opportunities. Along with this, with the relinquishment, is bringing some improvements forward that, frankly, at the time there was no knowledge of it. There was a sense of nothing like this is going to happen for a long time, and yet things are happening, and the roundabout's happening. So good things sometimes sneak up on us, and this is one where that's happening. And Mr. Bailey, thank you for your observations and making this a real go. So I look forward to supporting this motion.
Thanks. I've one question. I know some members of the area have looked at actually that intersection of Cliff Drive and Meigs with the famous scramble. I know you and I have talked about that too, and there's some pros and cons, I guess. But is that part of the community conversation? And scramble meaning there's traffic signals where no cars go and people can go diagonally across the street, and then obviously the people aren't going diagonally across the street when the cars are. But is that part of the conversation, or is that just not something that can work at that intersection?
Madam Mayor, we do plan on talking about it because it has come up and it's something people are interested in. If you'll indulge with me here, I do have a technical explanation for you that I'll say why I wouldn't recommend it at this location. I'll walk you through this.
I didn't tell him I was going to ask this question. You're good, Mr. Bailey.
Thank
You're very
you.
good.
People were really interested in this, though, so I was wondering if it would come up. It's also called a pedestrian-only phase. It's also called a scramble, like you mentioned. So what we have today is the order of the movements, the phasing, we call it, is represented on this top line right here. And as well as this is the average amount of time that each of those movements gets during the PM peak hour. So we have our east and westbound left turns, and then our east and westbound through movements, as well as the parallel pedestrian movements. And then these last two movements, it's what we call split phased. So the northbound goes as well as the northbound pedestrians, and then the southbound goes as well as the southbound pedestrians. All that adds up to about 100-second cycle length. That's the amount of time it takes to cycle through all the movements, which an average delay of about 42.8 seconds. So we don't like delay. That's people arriving on red lights, getting frustrated, wondering why the green light isn't happening faster. So we want to bring that down. What would happen if we actually had a pedestrian-only phase is it would make a longer cycle because it takes and during the longer cycle there's more traffic arriving, so it takes a little bit longer to serve each of these movements. So now we've got 21 seconds for the left turn, 39 for the throughs, 29 for northbound, 23 for southbound, and 39. It's a really long number when you're talking about traffic signal timing. In order to provide enough time for people to cross diagonally, because that's a pretty big intersection. So now you've got a cycle length of 150 seconds, and the average delay balloons out to 107 seconds. That's a lot.
That's the best explanation I've heard so far about a scramble.
So if we were to implement this, the day we would implement it, we'd also have to create a deficiency plan on how we were going to address the congestion we created at this intersection. So this isn't the best location for a pedestrian scramble. We will talk to the public about that, and we haven't really got into the why we wouldn't recommend it with the public yet, so we would certainly want to share this with them.
Great. Okay. Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One other thing I wanted to add, the almost universal request I have heard from people living in this area is, gee, we'd like to see the speed limit reduced. And I tried to say, or I think accurately, that's talk about the 85% rule and what the state requires, et cetera. However, am I correct in that? Okay. Secondly, though, what we are doing here, to some degree, addresses that because narrower car lanes tend to reduce speed, do they not?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, yes. Your first point, the state sets forth a procedure that we have to follow in how we set the speed limits. So we actually have to go out and measure the speeds people are traveling and then set the speed limit to reflect those speeds. And your second point is, yes, it creates more what we call side friction. So the less comfortable people feel, the less likely they're to go fast. So if you have a big, wide lane, straight, flat street, they're going to feel really comfortable going fast. So if you do things like narrow the lanes, it'll make them feel a little less comfortable, and it will bring the speeds down a little bit.
Well, at least more cautious, let's put it that way. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Item number 12.
Appeal of single-family design board approvals for 215 La Jolla Drive residents.
Okay, so this is an appeal. Let me just explain how the process works for everyone here and listening. We'll have a staff presentation first about the project. At that afterwards, we might have questions up here, but also anyone from the Single Family Design Review Board who is here and like to speak can do so at that time. Then the appellant will have up to 30 minutes to present his presentation, and then the applicant. And then if there's any time left over from those 30 minutes, you can use that time after the public comment piece before it comes back to council for deliberations. So, and then the public comment piece, you have up to 2 minutes to speak at the podium. And if during your presentations for the appellant or applicant, if council has questions and we're going back and forth, I'll stop the clock at that point since we're interrupting your presentation. So before I get to staff, I've been advised by our city attorney if we could ask first if any of us up here on the dais has had any ex parte communications with anyone involved related to this appeal. And I'll just start by saying I've not, but I did want to say, although I could not make the site visit yesterday, I did go up there this morning. I walked around the block. I was there for about 20 minutes. I saw the story poles, so just so everyone knows, I did see the site on site. Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I spoke to attorneys on both sides yesterday and Mr. Weston today on my phone.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Murillo?
I've had 2 telephone conversations with Mr. Chatillo.
Great. Mr. Francisco?
I had about a 4-minute conversation with Mr. Chatillo at the site visit yesterday.
Okay. And Mr. Hart?
Last week, I met here at City Hall with Mr. and Mrs. Busey and Derek Weston and David Van Hoy, where they shared the plans for their remodel, along with some information about the neighborhood and the number of second-story homes in the neighborhood. And then yesterday, after the site visit, I met with Mark Chatillo and Ms. Sider at their home, at Ms. Sider's home, and they showed me similar information from their perspective.
Is that everyone? Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, Mr. Limon?
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Jaime Limon, Senior Planner, and I will be making the presentation. Before we get into the actual presentation, I did want to outline the appeal issues before you today and the things that I'm going to touch on. There is a question about how a neighborhood is defined, and we'll have some examples of what our guidelines state regarding that issue. Obviously, any project before the Single Family Design Board, there's a question of whether it's been found to be compatible with the neighborhood. So I'll outline how the Single Family Design Board reviewed this project. The appellants have raised several land use issues, and I'm going to briefly touch upon some of those issues that have been raised. And with respect to how the city planning has reviewed the project and how we've analyzed those project impacts. And I also want to touch on the fact that staff believes that there is a private view protection issue that's center to this appeal. The location is located in the West Mesa neighborhood. You can see this is an aerial view that shows the block of La Jolla Drive and the subdivision that indicates it's in the center of that location. You can see to the left here the Douglas Family Reserve that's in close proximity to this site. So with respect to the project description, we have additions and remodeling that are proposed for this home at 215 La Jolla Drive. It's an existing one-story single-family residence. There are two primary additions being proposed, one on the upper story over a newly reconstructed garage, approximately 379 square feet. They're also planning to expand the living room, and we have some additional information that shows you the footprints that where these additions are occurring on the ground floor. This is considered a small lot for this single-family residential zone. It's 6,000 square foot. There is a total of 2,293 square feet proposed after all construction is completed, and this is targeted to be just under the 85% floor area ratio guideline called out in our single-family residential design guidelines. There were two zoning modifications approved for the reconstruction of the garage that occurred earlier this year. Those decisions were not appealed to the City Council or Planning Commission. This location is within the coastal zone. Here you see the proposed site plan. It outlines the basic requirements for open yard area in the lower left of 1,250 square feet. That is one of the considerations of why the addition is now being placed up on the upper floor, because they would essentially violate that requirement for open yard space if they were proposing their residential master bedroom addition on the ground floor. And the Single Family Design Board looked at this very closely to see if there was a solution, and they found that it would not be reasonable to take up the entire lot for the expansion. Here you have some perspectives of the addition as you see from the front street and to the rear of the property. And what I've done is crossed out some of the privacy screen that was originally shown to the Single Family Design Board that is no longer proposed on the upper floor. Here you have the first floor level plan. You can see the proposed layout, again, reconfiguring the front entry of the home, expanding the living room, and showing the new location of the garage. The second floor layout showing approximately above the garage, including a master bedroom and outdoor deck to the rear of the property. Again, what I'm indicating to you is what the Single Family Design Board was reviewing at their last hearing, which this project was, where it received project design approval and final approval. And one of the last considerations was how they were dealing with this privacy glass screening matter, and it ended up being removed as part of the elements for that screening for the deck. Here is the street elevation. Again, the privacy screen wall removed from the project. Okay, so the project before you brings up some question about how the Single Family Design Board defines a neighborhood. What we've included as part of your staff report in here on the screen is how the design guidelines speak to different definitions of how an immediate neighborhood is defined with respect to how they determine compatibility. One of the disputes in question is what type of characteristics should be used to define the immediate neighborhood. We outline in our guidelines that one of the characteristics could be similar zoning, properties built as part of the same original subdivision, which some of the dissenting members or the minority opinion on this 4-3 split vote considered as one of the guiding factors of what they considered the immediate neighborhood, how the original subdivision was originally created for these homes. Common access routes, similar architectural styles, these are all criteria that are spelled out in our guidelines. There's also a larger neighborhood that can be used, which is the general plan neighborhood as defined, and that is a much larger area that could be considered the entire West Mesa area. And then we have what we call a neighborhood study area. But what I'm going to do is try to define how those are a little slightly different. Here you have a survey that was presented to the Single Family Design Board that outlined the immediate neighborhood, what they felt were surrounding properties that also had two-story development. And so you could see that the property in the center is the property in question under appeal, and we don't have as many two stories within this surrounding block. But as you go beyond In other neighboring blocks, we have more and more second stories or two-story developments. Again, this is the general plan neighborhood. West Mesa is a much larger area in the city that also could be used as in a greater context of defining the neighborhood. And then what we have is the neighborhood study area. This was one of the options that was proposed to define a neighborhood. It's to be considered as part of the analysis. It was primarily determined to be used for the 20 closest homes analysis. In other words, when we discussed FAR standards being introduced into the city, we determined that we needed to find some quantifiable area to do comparisons. And this was a reasonable radius that we felt was could be easily managed and acquired for statistical purposes. So when projects are over 85% FAR, this is a standard requirement. This study is not necessarily required for all proposals. In this case, again, when a project exceeds 85%, the maximum required floor area ratio, the applicant is required to provide the study. It's an informational tool used by the reviewers to assist in determining the compatibility of the project size within its neighborhood. And it's not the only measuring tool to be used. And again, this study was not required for this application. With respect to the single-family design board review of this project, again, it was a 4-3 split vote, which is unusual. We typically get a consensus, and we might have some disagreements on certain issues, but the board was split, and you'll have both sides here to discuss that. If you have some questions, Bernie Bernstein is here, as well as the chair, Fred Sweeney, if you'd like to hear from them. The majority did support the project. They determined that there were other 2 stories surrounding the neighborhood. This obviously was a controversial appeal because we had both sides represented by the neighborhood. We had both supporting and objecting to the proposal. Because of that, I think the Single-Family Design Board took its time in making a final assessment. They asked that a site visit be organized, an organized site visit, and story poles to be erected on the site. I think that took an extra step on their part to go out and carefully look and walk the neighborhood to see. And also it was a benefit to the neighbors so they can actually see the outline of the addition and see how it would impact the neighborhood. Finally, the expressed concern really didn't focus on size per se. It was mostly the impacts to loss of privacy and to a lesser degree views, as I see it. So the Single-Family Design Board primarily the chair emphasized that he did walk around the neighborhood, and he believed that the board should consider a 15-minute walking distance. That is something that is outlined in our guidelines that it can be used. Again, the issue of contention is should that area be smaller with respect to neighborhood definition. The neighborhood is not divided as only a 1 block or 20 closest homes. It's to be considered and assist in that evaluation, but the guidelines do not say just look at the single block as a definition of neighborhood. The guidelines also say new and remodeled homes should be compatible and not significantly larger than the immediate neighborhood. That guidance is obviously given to applicants to target a size of addition. Staff believes that is good guidance and that it has worked well for the process to actually know a set number that an applicant can shoot for and expect an easier time in trying to get a project approved. Again, here's the photos of the story poles that were placed on the site visit. So I'd like to get into some of the land use issues that were spelled out by some of the correspondence that was given to you. One of the issues is consistency with coastal regulations, whether the project in fact has an adverse environment effect. Staff looked at this site. It is not in a location close to a bluff. It isn't close. We determined that it's over 300 feet from the ocean beach location. And a lot of examples were cited as how those projects were evaluated more carefully with consistency with these regulations. But we believe this is not comparable. There are other examples that are cited that are much closer to the bluff, and therefore that type of process where a project might have been reviewed by the Planning Commission several years ago where we had a different process are not a fair comparison. We also believe that this project is in compliance with CEQA. This clearly is a small addition and qualifies for a categorical exemption, and we don't believe that there are project impacts. Some of the issues that were raised are whether or not there are blockage of scenic public views. We don't believe that's the case. I have an aerial view of that, and that there will be light glow and significant private view impacts. We don't believe that's the case as evidenced by the site visit. I don't know if that all the council members looked at that issue, but we don't believe that is the case. Here you have the views from the Douglas Family Preserve. The concern, again, is that this addition will be visible from various points at Douglas Family Preserve. And our belief is that there are closer homes in closer proximity and that this is not going to be a very significant impact. Here you have a locational sort of understanding of when you're in the Douglas Family Preserve, you're looking towards the ocean for those scenic public vistas, not necessarily looking back towards the residential neighborhood. So again, we don't believe there are public scenic views that are being impacted. And I wanted to speak to you specifically about private views because one of the issues that isn't necessarily hit on as the primary cause of why neighbors would be upset is that there are cases where building does or building proposals on second floors block views. And as you can recall, I don't know if some of you here all of you were here with the NPO update. I know Madam Mayor was involved with those discussions where we talked about should the city get into a view protection ordinance and provide stronger ordinance protection. And what we essentially ended up with was strengthening the good neighbor policies and guidelines and asking that applicants talk to their neighbors to consider their point of view and their potential view blockage and to actually show them their development plans and be considerate. And for the most part, that process has worked. There have been few appeals since the adoption of the NPO in 2007. And I believe it's a combination of those type of guidelines that are in place and the FAR standards that have now, the debate isn't really whether or not there's a mansions being created. It's really the location and the size of where you place these additions. And finally, again, staff recommends that you support the Single Family Board's decision and vote approval for this project. We believe there is consistency with design guidelines. It's a modest, small-scale development. There was consideration of neighbors, the neighbors' consideration for siting the actual addition. You'll hear from the architect how a different proposal was actually redesigned because of that. There is a lower range floor area ratio proposed. It's closer to the 85% maximum guideline versus the 100%. There's that range in our guidelines, in our standards that speak to that. And we believe this project is compatible with the adjacent development and their surrounding neighborhood. And I want to emphasize that one of the issues with respect to the history of the subdivisions is whether or not the original subdivision contemplated one or two-story limits on construction. And there is a provision for doing that. The Planning Commission and there are other tools for putting conditions, covenants, restrictions on properties to restrict second-story development. That was not done on this subdivision and the adjacent subdivisions. The neighborhood preservation ordinance findings can be made. We've included that outline in our staff report if you so choose. And for that, on that basis, we're recommending that you deny the appellant's appeal, uphold the single-family design board decision, and approve the project and make the required NPO findings. Thank you.
Any questions? Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Weston in his letter said that zoning here expressly allows two-story homes with a height of up to 30 feet. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilman Hotchkiss, this is a single-family residential zone, an E3 zone, and in most residential zones, you have a 30-foot height limit, so you're well below that maximum height.
Okay, thank you.
We have Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Bernstein. If you'd like to come on up at this point and give us your perspective, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. And you can take my slip out. I wasn't sure how this worked.
Got it right here.
Thank you for the opportunity just to share with you. Yes, we did have a 4-3 split vote, and one of the folks that represents the minority is here, and hopefully she, at the time she voted, she wasn't clear on what her vote represented, so hopefully she can share that with you today. But the majority voted based on the fact that we did find neighborhood compatibility, and we really looked at scale, bulk, and size as a part of our evaluation. As you can imagine, this is a bit of a challenge for a board who has to work in a very subjective arena. Architecture is subjective. But I think we all try very hard to be objective as best we can. And the other thing I believe we really work at is trying to look over the existing circumstances, because a lot of these buildings that get built will last much longer in most cases than the occupants that occupy them. The houses will be here for a very long time. People will transition out for various reasons. So hopefully one of our jobs is to try to look way down the road as to what kind of impact our decisions make on the creation of a neighborhood. So as you proceed forward, I'm going to pose 2 or 3 questions that you probably ought to think about as you discuss this and make a decision. So one, is this an appeal based on the definition of a neighborhood, or is it about one individual's perception of their private views, both from their residents and for those that might see into that property? 2, if it's about the definition of a neighborhood, then some specific items one might consider, and this is really important because this will provide future guidance for the Single Family Design Board, because this discussion about what defines a neighborhood. Is a neighborhood defined by geographic constraints, such as main thoroughfares, vegetative boundaries, waterways, other physical boundaries, or other defining characteristics? In reference sources such as a pattern language by Christopher Alexander, which I kind of use as my Bible in the planning that I've done over my career, my years, and there are other sources many of us use. They define a neighborhood as one that has about 500 residents. That might be different in New York City, where we might have 500 in a single block, versus somewhere maybe perhaps like Bakersfield, where we have 500 spread over various amounts of acres. And one is that it can be defined by that 1,500-foot radius, that discussion. The average person, based on many criteria, walks about 150 feet per minute. So what can you walk in 1,500 feet? And does that constitute a neighborhood? And are there other similar attributes, such as common access to shops, parking, public right-of-ways, other public institutions? So, definition of a neighborhood. Is a neighborhood defined just by a block, or is it defined by a large, more continuous area? And if it is a block, then what is the acceptable block shape? Is it equidistant? Is it a rectangle? Is it a circle? What is it? And then finally, if the council considers the work of the Single Family Design Board and its requirement to judge the size, scale, and bulk of a project, did it correctly interpret those definitions as defined in the guidelines? And that's these guys, and I don't know if Jaime has an example of those, but that's the work that we look at. And do those guidelines prohibit the physical envelope of a project that fits in a single-story criteria, 17 feet 6 inches? Does that allow for a second story? By definition, because one can say that if this project had proceeded as a single-story project, raising a roof to 17 foot 6 inches, then it would not have been reviewed, as I understand it, by the Single Family Design Board. So those are things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bernstein? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. White, you have a question?
I just wanted to ask Mr. Sweeney, are you going to stay for the hearing?
Yes, sir. Great. I'll be here for the whole time, and I'm available for any questions should you have.
You.
Thank you.
And Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Limon, could you clarify this business about it not needing review from the Single Family Design Board if it were a single story?
One of the changes that occurred for the NPO update was to place a height limit to consider when a trigger would be met for a second story or higher development, and 17-foot height limit was placed. So any two-story development or anything exceeding 17 feet is a trigger. So what they're implying here is that they could have kept this addition 6 inches less or more and not had that requirement if they proposed a one-story development.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bernstein?
Good afternoon, and thank you for all the effort that you're all putting in and visiting the site and listening to the neighbors. There's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of good arguments on either side, and I'm just going to briefly speak now, and I'll stick around also and see if I can. I know there's going to be a lot of issues. I've already heard things that Jaime said that I didn't agree with, but I'm not going to go into all that. I just wanted to say that for many years, a lot of concerned neighbors have worked on and worked toward the balance and the harmony that were so challenging for us. And I think at the heart of this whole thing is that this really is about when a change is made in an established neighborhood, it is essential to properly balance that change with a respect for the design features and characteristics of surrounding properties. Homes are more likely to be compatible when their volume and bulk are at an appropriate scale with their neighbors. This is the concept of neighborhood compatibility. And then you're all familiar, that's straight out of our guidelines, the issues that came about. So I would just like to be here and be able to answer questions as they come up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you both for your work on the board. Okay, so we have the appellant, and we have 30 minutes up on the clock right there. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Before we get started, I wanted to hand out a couple of things. First, I have a document to hand out, and I also have, I had given at the site visit yesterday to each of the council members a booklet, and I didn't get a copy to you.
But you sent it by email, and I did look at it this morning. So
I did. I have extra copies.
Oh,
and
how
I'm going to refer
exciting!
to
Thank
this.
you.
So, and I have also, there's two sets here. There's a booklet, and then there's exhibits.
Okay.
So,
all right, I'm going to start the clock now.
I know, Councilmember Francisco, I didn't get the exhibits to you yesterday, but they were all part of what was emailed.
Great, so I'll start the clock now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I see you have 25 minutes, which is perfect. I'll save 5 minutes for rebuttal. I'm Mark Chatillo, and I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property at 225 La Jolla Drive, Rhonda Sider. And before I get started, I have to say I'm a little conflicted being up here today because what we're looking at is a design review decision. And I have sat through many design review hearings, and I get a lot of calls from people saying, gosh, there's a big thing that's happening next door near my neighborhood. Can you help me? There's a meeting at the BAR or single family design. And I tell those people that they don't want me, that they need to go as the neighbors. They're the people that need to go to the design review boards and raise their issues because they have what's at stake. And they're not legal issues. I can be a representative and a voice, but for people who can attend those meetings, they should be there and they should attend them. And so I, in some ways, feel like I wish I weren't here because these kinds of things need to be resolved without lawyers. But Ms. Sider called me and said, there's this thing that's going on in my neighborhood. I'm very concerned about it. The applicant has hired an attorney themselves. And what should I do? Will you represent me? Will you help me in this process? And I said, gosh, you need to go on your own. You need to be able to articulate. And I can tell you that Ms. Sider is very organized, and she's presented a lot of information for the Single Family Design Board. But if you walk to a poker game, and the dealer in the poker game has a gunslinger behind them, and you're playing for real money, then you want to have your own gunslinger there. And so I am here. And as I have dug into this project and this process, I have to say I'm really glad that I'm here because I was able to identify a number of issues that were associated with the single-family design review's process, the board's process overview for this project, which I've seen repeated in other projects that the city and other jurisdictions have processed, and raised some pretty fundamental questions. And you, as the oversight entity to the Single Family Design Board, have the opportunity to provide this guidance. And so I was heartened to hear Mr. Sweeney say, these are the questions that are before you, some questions to ask, because the Single Family Design Board does need guidance. And I would argue that it's not about size, bulk, scale. The fundamental question is, presented by this appeal, is neighborhood compatibility. And the first question associated with neighborhood compatibility is, what is the relevant neighborhood to which the project is compared? And as I'll describe in a minute, I think that the Single Family Design Board fundamentally erred because they relied on a definition of a broader neighborhood, the immediate neighborhood, under our design guidelines, and they overlooked the role of a neighborhood study area, which is the 20 closest homes. Now, 20 closest homes has actually two purposes within our design guidelines. One purpose is when you have a project which exceeds 85% FAR, there is a requirement that an applicant go to the county assessor, collect the data on the 20 closest homes, their floor area, elevations, blah, 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 and present that as a formal 20-home study to the Single Family Design Board. I believe that there's a second use, and I think I appreciate staff member Limon and his comment saying that he disagrees with this. And I've had a number of conversations with Mr. Limon about these issues, and I'm glad to say we've been able to refine the issues that are really before you today and the issues that you need to decide. And I believe that there's a second utility to the definition of a neighborhood study area, these 20 closest homes. It's one that is supposed to guide the Single Family Board's initial evaluation of whether a project is compatible with the neighborhood. I do not contend, as staff has characterized our position, as being that that's the only one. It's not an exclusive analysis. But as the Single Family Design Board is looking at a project, the Busey's home here, that is going to add a second story where there is no second story within that area, that's something that they should first take notice of. That's not necessarily the end of the discussion. But what happened here and why we had to appeal this was that the Single Family Design Board majority did not look at the neighborhood study area and the 20 closest homes, but went immediately to the other definition of the immediate neighborhood. And in that definition of immediate neighborhood, as you heard Mr. Sweeney explain, they relied on just a couple of the criteria associated with the distance, the 15-minute walking distance and so forth, when in fact there's some other factors that are involved. So if I could ask you to turn to the document that I handed. I didn't want to go through a big PowerPoint here. Staff, do you mind putting just the map up instead of the on there so that we can see that? Great. So I gave you a short document today, and it is the compatibility guidelines is the first page. If you flip over, I went through the trouble of highlighting the relevant language for the compatibility guidelines. So this is, just to frame it, this is the language that was adopted by council as part of a process to implement the neighborhood preservation ordinance. They've been revised. This is the second version, and this was your language, the guidance, the standards that you asked the Single Family Design Board to apply. And the whole, in terms of the neighborhood compatibility issue and Single Family Design Board, it all boils down to this definition and this evaluation of neighborhood compatibility under Section 6. And there are two prongs to it, and I think maybe this is one of those circumstances where people can focus on different aspects of it and lose track of the other aspect. And so that's where your guidance is really needed. The guidelines read that the goal is to design a project to be compatible with the immediate neighborhood. There are three definitions relevant here. There's the general plan neighborhood, which is the larger area, the West Mesa. The immediate neighborhood, which is defined by a series of 7 criteria I'll discuss in a moment. And then there is the neighborhood study area. These are all here on the page highlighted. the neighborhood study area is defined here as the 20 closest homes. So the direction in the guidelines is design a project to be compatible with the immediate neighborhood, 7 criteria, somewhat larger, and carefully consider the neighborhood study area for a project. And our concern is that Single Family Design Board did not carefully study the neighborhood study area as part of their analysis, but went immediately to the immediate neighborhood. Now, further on the text, that's just the heading for this section. And if you go down in the next paragraph, the highlighted text there reads that the Single Family Board is supposed to follow the following guidance. To help determine project compatibility with a neighborhood, the Single Family Design Board will generally refer to a neighborhood study area defined below. And in that definition on the same page, it's the 20 closest homes. The text continues, a neighborhood study area allows the Single Family Design Board to efficiently review homes for compatibility. Now, what exactly that means is the subject of this debate and this appeal. Staff tells people tells applicants and tells the Single Family Design Board, and here the Single Family Design Board followed their guidance and said, we do not look at the neighborhood study area and the 20 closest homes. We're looking only at the top part of the language, the heading, and we're not even looking at the second clause of the heading. We are only looking at at the immediate neighborhood. I provided you in the binder the transcripts. We went to it's crazy. We had to transcribe the Single Family Design Board to be able to demonstrate to you the things that they did and didn't consider. And if you look at that language, it's clear that this exact issue that's sharpened up here, and again, Mr. Limon stated it, he doesn't think that the neighborhood study area has any application except for under the circumstance of a project which is in excess of 0.85 or 85% FAR. That's a whole different set of processes that follow from an oversized house. This is not one. It's only 84.93%. It's close. So you want to look carefully at it. And as Ms. Bernstein read, when you're changing the character of a community, you should be looking carefully at it. And further, the guidelines say that when you're going to a second story, the Single Family Design Board should look carefully at those. They give additional review, according to these guidelines, to a second story as opposed to a single story. And there's been some comment about, well, they could go 17 feet, 16.9 feet, and not as a single story, and not be subject to the Single Family Design Board, or they could go 30 feet, but be subject to the Single Family Design Board and all these same findings of compatibility and everything. Our position is, if they did go 16.9 feet across the side, that would be unfortunate. It would block views, but it wouldn't set the precedent of a second story in the neighborhood, and it wouldn't cause the privacy impacts associated with having windows and people standing on a second floor and looking straight across into the uphill neighbors. So these are the standards that we think are relevant. And in the guidelines, in this page, is an example of the 20 closest homes. And to me, when I saw this issue was coming up and being presented to the Single Family Design Board in such a way that there was a dispute as to whether this definition even applied, I was really aghast, and I wrote a long letter, and it didn't get observed, or it was read and considered, but the majority of the Single Family Design Board ruled that the definition should be just the immediate neighborhood, and that was the only thing that applies. So that squared up is the issue before you. Now, what are the facts? In the materials that I presented to you, I explained a lot about the history of this neighborhood. And I think that the most, the starting place, of course, is the original subdivision. And I know a lot of you have seen this, so I'll just show the picture, but it's on page 2 of the bound materials, and it shows this subdivision. This was the first subdivision was 2 separate tracts in 1961, and they are the 2 in the interior, and then the third tract is just the block that is adjacent to the Douglas Family Preserve. And as we walked around yesterday, we all noticed that there was kind of a changing character. It was minor, bigger lots, bigger houses, double garages, things like that. But the original design that original architect was Ken Kruger, somebody with whom the Single Family Design Board is familiar. And as he designed the, actually I have a slightly bigger picture, I think. As he designed well, I'll stick with the representation on page 3 of this binder. And as La Jolla Drive was laid out, it stair-stepped down. This was Seacliff, or Shoreline Terrace was the name of the subdivision, the original 1961 subdivision. It was built in this single-story, low-slung Eichler style, which you saw in that on La Jolla Drive, in particular, and some of the surrounding areas. And then when you went around to the other side, that was a later subdivision, different architect, and it had a different feel to it. While it's true that there was not a subdivision covenant that said that it shall only be single-story, and it is true that the zoning allows taller homes, the fact of the matter is that when this was built, when this subdivision was built, it was built with the intention that you would have this ability to put the house on the north side of each lot. You have an open yard, flat opening to the south side of each lot, which was an outdoor yard, and then there's a retaining wall that drops down to the next house. And at each house, you looked over the house below you. Some at the up end have views of the ocean. Those at the lower end don't have views of the ocean, but they have views of the sky and the mountains. And that's part of the character of this community. And in addition to size, bulk, and scale, I would argue that your single-family design board needs to consider the character of a neighborhood. That's why we say, well, let's start with the 20 closest homes and see how this project fits and works with the 20 closest homes, and then you can look further out at bigger areas. But you should start that analysis with those 20 closest homes. And when you do, you have to acknowledge the original subdivision and this original design intention to step down, and the fact that, as characterized on page 3 on the lower one, if you pop up as the third house does here, this is a rendering of what this house would look like if approved. It blocks the views uphill. Now, recognize that already there have been remodels on this street, and there have been opportunities to expand and even come up slightly, but to do it in a way that doesn't intrude into the skyline and interfere with views from houses on the other side. And that's what we would hope that your council will see the wisdom of and will recommend that the applicant come back. And there's a lot of history about other parcels in this neighborhood. And I think the important piece for you to recognize is that this is not the first proposed second story. In fact, that adjacent subdivision that came through in 1977 that Ms. Shank, who was here a minute ago, is part of, and on the western side, that had originally that subdivision of 18 or so homes was going to be a mix of 2-story and 1-story. And the neighbors in that area in the 70s objected, and they reached an agreement and a compromise with the subdivider then that there would be only single-story homes on that street. There would be the subdivision, and it's in the materials, the subdivision specifically allows 3 split-level homes. And those are the 3 on the 3 purple ones that are adjacent to the single-family preserve, the Douglas Family Preserve there. Those are split-level homes. Coincidentally, so is the one down at the bottom of Medcliff. But the design for the inner circle here was from the original subdivision to be single-story. Now, that was in 1961. Fast forward over 50 years, there have been a number of applications for second-story homes in that little area. None have been approved. So this appeal presents to you also a precedent question, which I don't think that the Single-Family Design Board really wanted to grapple with. Are we going to allow second stories in this particular neighborhood? If this home goes to second stories, you know what's going to happen. Wrong graphic. What's going to happen is that the people who are uphill from that aren't going to have their views anymore. And they're going to go, well, what are we going to do? We have to go up too. And there will be a cascade over time of second stories in this particular neighborhood. And that would be unfortunate. That's what we're trying to avert. And going to some of the land use issues that we had about the Douglas Family Preserve and what does this represent within the coastal zone is that if we have a series of homes that are going up, it's not just the one, it's not just this individual. And we did simulate in the materials, there we go, what this house looks like from the Douglas Family Preserve. I'll admit, it's tucked in the trees. It's not sticking up like a giant sore thumb, but it is at night. During the daytime, it's not sticking up like a giant sore thumb. It's going to be visible behind in front of vegetation, but at night it's a whole different story. And particularly dawn and dusk, and this simulation was intended to show what it would look like in dawn and dusk conditions. It's not dark, but it shows that the pop-up is visible as a lantern. And on the south and west side, it's almost all glass. So the design of the house is such that it's going to have a very dramatic effect on the Douglas Family Preserve. And you have to consider that in the context not of this one house, but of all the houses on the street. Because once one goes in, the uphill neighbors really have limited opportunity to be able to then enjoy their views. And views were part of the original neighborhood character. That's what they were trying to accomplish. And so that is, Stafford Limon indicated that was an issue, that private, we don't want to protect private views. The reality is that is part of what makes this neighborhood special. It may be that, I don't think we're not arguing that because it impacts private views, it cannot be increased. But I think that given the neighborhood compatibility question, you need to look at the totality of the circumstances. And the fact that the intention of this area was to preserve views and to preserve this symmetry of development so that with single-story homes, you had the opportunity for each home to enjoy views of the sky, of the mountains, and some of the ocean. That's part of the neighborhood character that is core to the finding of neighborhood compatibility. And if you do choose to allow a second story here, to recognize that that's going to have a cumulative effect and go well beyond what we have really been looking at in this area as it stands now. Taking us back to the Single Family Design Board and their analysis, in the brochure, in the pamphlet here, actually, let me go to the key question.
You have about 10 minutes left.
Thank you. Chairman Sweeney posed 3 questions, which I thought was brilliant. Really, you have questions before you, and I chose to frame the question a little bit different, but I think it really is much the same. The key question, and it's for purposes of neighborhood compatibility, is under these guidelines, does the neighborhood study area 20 closest homes only apply to projects in excess of the 85% FAR, as staff has contended and as employed by the Single Family Design Board, or does it help guide the Single Family Design Board? Does the neighborhood study area also apply in a different role to their analysis of neighborhood compatibility? And then if it does, what do we have here? And as described by the original subdivision, as described by the history of 50-plus years of maintaining this area as single story, we think that it's very clear that a second story is not compatible with this neighborhood. And so that's the gravamen of what we needed to bring to you. And just to emphasize, to sharpen how the Single Family Design Board did discuss it, on page 23, first of all, in the staff report on page 5, it specifically says that 85% FAR is used for that purpose and not for this purpose. But if you look at page 23 and 24 of the pamphlet here, I excerpted the transcripts of the discussion. And in it, at the bottom of 23, Chairman Sweeney speaks to the definition of neighborhood that we're using, and he says it's incorrect. And I think he may have been referencing his other colleagues. is stated by, if they want to talk about the block, that is certainly a different definition, but it's not the neighborhood by definition. And then over on the second page, again, that bottom paragraph says there seems to be the issue of neighborhood compatibility, the issue of the definition of neighborhood compatibility. Contrary to some others, my colleagues, and contrary to some members of the community, I think it fairly clear that it means the immediate neighborhood by definition in our guidelines, and that's the 150 feet per minute. It's 15-minute walk from the site. That's the neighborhood. And if you want to talk about the block, that's a definition, but neighborhood compatibility in this neighborhood as it goes all the way to Mesa Lane and up to Cliff Drive. That's the fundamental error that I believe that the Single Family Design Board committed in their analysis. And Member Bernstein said in the paragraph up above that she disagreed. There's 3 levels. Actually, it was Ms. Woolery. There are 3 levels, and you should be looking, among other things, at the original subdivision. So I want to now go a little bit to the definitions in your compatibility. So back to the first sheet here, and these definitions in the few minutes I have left, just to talk about, well, could this even be considered consistent with the immediate neighborhood? And again, this is for purpose of assisting your council in sharpening your guidance to the Single Family Design Board. Because as you heard from Chairman Sweeney, he's very much a proponent of looking at the 15-minute walk radius. And really that was the principal, if not exclusive, thing that they looked at and omitted the single family neighborhood, the neighborhood study area, the 20 closest homes. But the definition of immediate neighborhood also includes similar zoning, first. Second, and I'm reading from the bullets at the bottom here, properties built as part of your same original subdivision. So that point about what was the subdivision and what was the intent of that subdivision also helps color and inform the neighborhood compatibility analysis under the immediate neighborhood definition. So I think, and then there's common access routes, which really don't apply that well. Walkable radius. The problem with that question, if we're going to define what are compatible projects, expansions throughout our community, is that you, in 15 minutes, can walk quite a distance, and you dilute the analysis by looking at larger and larger areas. I think this is a helpful graphic on the screen, because if you look and see, there are a smattering of the purple. Those are 2 stories. It's not accurate because we know that the 3 by Douglas Family Preserve are actually split levels. Maybe that's a 2-story element. This is a 2-story home where you have floor with a whole level above it, as opposed to a split story where you have a lower floor and then a partial second story. But even with this map, if you look at that larger area, you can see that in the West Mesa there are not that many second-story homes. And if you look, in the inner circle, which is really kind of this special neighborhood, there are none. And so that comes back to the precedent and really what, if you apply the facts to the standards, what judgment do you come up with? And we think that it's particularly important that your council does give consideration to exactly what was that original subdivision, that the analysis does start with the closest 20 homes, and then from there evaluate whether it does fit with the neighborhood. Here, because you have the Douglas Family Preserve, because you have the first second story in this neighborhood, which because of that immediate neighborhood, the 20 closest homes, this original subdivision, because of that design, allowing 1 second story is going to open the door to a whole series of them. So I'm going to wrap up at this point, Madam Mayor. I'm open for questions, but I just wanted to let you know that that's why this is it's a really important issue. Somewhat of a test case, but it's one also that matters.
Are you wrapping up, or am I stopping the clock, or are you wrapping up? Okay.
Because the one other point that I want to make is that...
well, then I'm putting the clock back on.
Keep me going.
You got 3 minutes and 35 seconds left.
There is a way to fit this development onto the existing lot. And this is a particularly important point. It's in this handout, the last page. We asked an architect to draw a couple of renditions if they were able to get the square footage that the Buseys would like to get on their second story onto the first floor. And what we see here is that they can do that. And there's two different configurations. One of the configurations is honoring the 10-foot SCE setback. Now, we all stood in the backyard, and you may recall my feeling of that area was this. It's not like that was a key part of their yard. That was their storage area. That might be an appropriate spot to be able to expand. And indeed, that's what Mr. Van Hoy has done on other homes. He's an architect that has worked on a number of homes, in fact, lived in this neighborhood, and so is very familiar with it. So we would, I just wanted to add this last point, Madam Mayor, that even observing the 10-foot SCE setback, there's adequate room to put over 380 square feet of additional development onto the site. And it turns out that there's a couple of homes on the lot at 205 and at 229 that actually built into the SCE setback to the 6-foot city setback, and that gives an additional 4 foot of width. It's not clear exactly how they got to do that, because that was a requirement, and if the easement is such, and it may well be that a single-story development can go into the SCE setback, that might be another way to get some additional room. So your direction to the Buseys, whom we respect and we appreciate their desire to upgrade their home and the neighborhood and support, but not in a second-story format. And our view is that it can be accomplished in a single-story format. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for the...
Thank you. You have 1:35 left if you need it after public comment. Are there any questions from council? Nope. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Weston.
Good afternoon. We're going to ask David Van Hoy to begin by presenting the actual house that is proposed, and then I will comment.
Great. Mr. Van Hoy.
Madam Mayor and council members, first I'd like to thank you for the great turnout at the site visit yesterday. We appreciate you all taking the time, and I was really impressed with the numbers there and the long walk around the block and the time that it took and the good questions that you all asked. So thank you for that, and makes this presentation easier because you've seen everything in real place as opposed to photographs. We're going to I'm going to talk obviously about mostly of the design intent and the architecture, and then Derek Weston's going to follow up with the more facts, if you will. This is an overall of let's call it the in-between neighborhood. It's larger than the 20 closest, and it's smaller than the 15-minute walk, but it seems to be reasonable. It's the Douglas Family Preserve, the Ocean, Mesa Lane, and Mesa School Lane. That's kind of a fairly knowledgeable area that and once you cross Mesa Lane or cross Mesa School Lane, things kind of change a little bit. So that's kind of the way we have described at least this slide. Is this going to work or not? Yeah, Trish, do you? Oh, there we go. It's just taking a while. Okay. Oh, I forgot how slow this thing is. Bear with me. While this is going back, we're going to look at the site plan for the. You got to love these. Here we go. The original Shoreline Terrace tract. You've heard a little bit of information about this. This is the original 30 houses that were built back in the early 60s, and the project house is right here. We did a little research and just kind of walked around, and basically 48%, so almost 50% of the original houses built in the 60s have either been remodeled with a volume element, or there are actually 3 two-story conversions of those houses. The purple ones. This one was actually the model home for the tract. There's one here, and then there's one down here on the lower part of La Jolla Drive. So essentially, 50% of the homes have already been adapted to 60 years later than when they were constructed, and what the needs are and so forth that we have now that were different in the 1960s. It's a wonderful area. The site right below here, my family and I lived there for 27 years. We built a fine home for ourselves, and we really enjoyed it. I always like to say that it's the only place in Santa Barbara where you can be on the ocean and be away from both the freeway and the railroad. And if you think about it, it's actually kind of a pretty special space. So we like it. This is the project site. You've seen that in the earlier things. Just wanted to, again, the neighborhood. We're at the bottom of La Jolla Drive looking up. It's a sloping street. The Mesa in general in this area, the West Mesa, has about a 5% grade to it. It goes up and down a little bit. We'll go up to the top of the street and look around just back here. The interesting thing here is that as we're up, the appellant's house is right here. You can see the roof and the steep driveway here. You see the wonderful amount of trees and so forth, and it's not necessarily a beautiful controlled plan, but there's a lot of trees, and some stay green all year long, some lose their leaves and so forth. But as far as views and so forth, there's a little bit of a conflict there, I think, in terms of being able to see a perfect ocean view and looking through a few obstacles. These are photographs of the house. You were there yesterday, so I won't spend a lot of time, but it's a house that, again, I don't think it's been touched since 1960 or 61, whenever it was constructed. It needs some renovation, and while the Buseys bought it with intention of renovating it and making room for themselves and their two fantastic kids, they'd like to get going on this and spruce up the neighborhood a little bit, at least their 6,000 feet of it. This is a diagram that we to help explain kind of why we some of the design intent. The yellow portions are existing buildings. The small area here is the 2 feet that the Transportation Department asked that we make a 20-foot wide garage instead of they were 18 back in the 60s. This is the open yard area requirement. The 10-foot setback that you've heard about, all the blue is setbacks and or the easement. So we have an opportunity. We have about 8 feet here before we hit the easement. There's not a lot you can do with given where what's there in terms of making space. We are using this space for a living room and attaching it to the existing kind of living room. Were we to try to squeeze a master bedroom into this area, it wouldn't. You can see the master bedroom is about the size of the garage, just slightly smaller on the upper floor. Were it to go here, it would actually block off all the light from this area. You'd have a wall here with a fence 5 feet away. You'd have a living room here, and you'd have something here, whatever use you wanted to place for it. So you'd end up with a sort of a dark spot in the middle of the room. So the thought was to put it up above and have some yard space and not try to cram things together. Our first concept we're showing you we were convinced that we wanted to be as close to the street as possible so that the views, all of the garages are lined up on the street, so the views really start here and go to the southwest in terms of looking at the ocean and the Douglas Family Preserve. This design, we actually drew it up. Frank Busey and I, we put up story poles, really fancy bamboo story poles. We met with the neighbors to see what it looked like from the street, from the neighborhood, and we all came to the conclusion that there was really an impact to the northern neighbor. The Mark and Victoria Paul is their name. I've known them for over 30 years. Our kids played together when we know lots of people still in the neighborhood. So we turned around and went to a different game plan with the design. And this is where we ended up, which is what we're showing you today, which we're using the existing house. One of the best things we can do from a sustainability standpoint is don't tear the whole house down and rebuild it and bring a bunch of new stuff in there. Use the existing house. So this fits around the existing house. We're adding some living room space here. We're getting the larger garage that the transportation department asked for. We're lowering the garage a little bit over a foot, and we're putting a very short second-story master bedroom on top of that, staying below the 17-foot level with that design. As we go upstairs, we'll show you the master bedroom suite is about 2210 by about 22.6, something like that. It's very livable. It's not a big suite. It has the walls are 6 feet 8 tall. There is a clear story around that's 12 inches tall, about this tall. That's used for natural daylighting, so we don't need to have any lights on during the day. And the lighting in this area, there's no lighting on the ceiling, and there's no lighting shining towards the ceiling. It's the lamps are all on the side. Basically, the bathroom will have some lighting for the vanity. And so this idea of the lighthouse effect is not going to be happening by design in this project, or in this part of the area. So the design is very compatible with the neighborhood because I designed 2 other houses right next door, so they don't look anything. They were all the exact same back in 1960, and we've been able to find different ways to make interesting houses out of all of them. This one was broken into 1, 2, 3 elements with a gap here, which is the front door. We've split the garage doors because big garage doors, 20 feet wide, don't look good on small houses. We're doing Western red cedar. We're using quality materials for the outside. Rhine zinc for all the trim. Rhine zinc is a very special kind of medium gray metal element that is really, really beautiful. There's a Rhine zinc fence next door. And on the rear side, we've got a little small patio with an overhang here. We've got planting here and planting here, so we're actually planting around the corner here at the second floor. And we have a small deck that, from questions yesterday, it's about 9'6" by about 8'6", something like that in terms of the physical size of that deck. And then leaving the existing house alone. The landscape plan, we were asked to provide a landscape plan. It's a really nice plan with basically redesigning the entire front. We are not required for stormwater. We don't meet the requirements for stormwater. However, we're doing permeable paving on the driveway. We're doing a catchment here for water that comes around the back of the house. Sustainable plants. We're removing 1 tree and planting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trees that are more appropriate for that location, with 1 tree here that'll be right next to the entrance. So we're going over and above what's required, and this is very close to the ocean, and this is one of the houses that really should be worrying about stormwater and pollution, and we're taking care of it. Again, the medium part of the neighborhood, you can look at our little yellow second story right here. We're going to zoom in a little bit to the this version of the 20 closest homes. This was we had the city give us the exact lots. It's actually the 20 closest lots, not homes, so you have to have an entire lot within the circle for it to count. There is a 2-story home here, and I beg to differ with the previous speaker because there is a garage here, full-height garage, and a full-height room over the top of that garage, and that's the same thing that we're building, which is a 2-story. That's a 2-story building. Just outside, but just outside of that, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 more 2-story houses, and then several more as you go outside the circle. Interestingly enough, from the appellant's house, there are 3 2-story lots within the circle, and then the same array of the additional ones close by. This is the 215 Selrose is the single one that relates to the Busey's house, and as you can see, you've got a full garage, you've got a full story here, going this full width. That is not a stepped house; it's a 2-story house. I'm going to go through here as quick as this little computer will get through it, but we can take a look at this is the neighboring house up the street. Again, a garage with a full story above it. We're going to look at the next house up the street, which was actually just remodeled, Frank, a couple of years ago. This one is on the turn there. Again, a garage with a full layer above it. We're going to go around the corner. The styles are sort of nicely mixed and matched in this area. I kind of like the variety. This is a large house that's been there with another 2-story behind it. It's a beautiful house, very nicely. It's very well landscaped and has incredible views. Down on the southern port, there's a wonderful new house. I think it won an award recently. It has a small area that is 2-story. Seems to work just fine. This is another one on Lower La Jolla. And then there's one up at the top of the street here. And as soon as we buy these pictures, they'll go faster, I promise. Yeah, man. Okay, this is another one up on Selrose. All of these are tangent to the 20 closest homes in the relative to the 215 La Jolla Drive project. There are this is an interesting area at the top of the street where there are 1, 2, 3, and there's actually a 4th one over here. This is an example of homes that are taller, or between 16 and 17 feet tall, that are 1-story. There's 4 of them in a row, and they're actually built up on about 8 feet. It's about an 8-foot high driveway to get up to those homes. They have very nice views up there, and they've got some miles on them. We did basically took photographs of all the homes and put it together so you can see the slope of the street. You can see this is the Pellets home. We just drew a line here so you can see that each home is basically stepped down somewhere between 4 and 5 feet. They're not all the same. The story poles are in this picture, but I'm going to put a little piece over the top of them here so you can see that little brown element would show the height of the proposed second floor master. And then down below here we have the Paul's area, their backyard, and you can see some bamboo that's on the Busey's side of this fence. You can see those right in here. After looking at different ways to provide privacy to their backyard, they actually suggested that we just continue another 6 or 7 feet of the same bamboo that'll stop at the same point. And you can see the story poles here, right here. So they'll come up and they'll just take care of that, and everybody is very comfortable with that solution, both the Busey's and the Pauls. We got an opportunity to see the views yesterday at the site walk. These are panoramic pictures from yesterday's site visit. It's a lot of roof and a lot of trees, which are really nice, and a lot of sky. This is one from the corner. This is one from the I don't know what it's called, but it's a covered kind of lanai area on the outside. This area actually has a raised area with a table, and it actually does have a little bit of a kind of a nice open view to that, again, that southwest direction. Again, our story poles, we've added the brown piece here. That's all of the second story element that you will be able to see. We've lined this up with the story poles exactly. So that's the impact, if there is one, on the view from 225 La Jolla. I understand. I'm going as fast as the little computer will take it. This is backed up against the house, and you can see how that element that's on the patio, it provides some shade, but it also, again, the view is really hit and miss. Our opinion is that basically this being our project here with a 2-story element and 225 La Jolla, the view with trees and some ocean is, again, really, this being south, is really in the southwest direction. And I think the appropriate placement for the second story element is not affecting their view, our immediate neighbor's view on either side either, because they're all supporting the project. Relative to the Douglas Family Preserve, really quickly, there's a city street light right off the preserve's entrance that throws more light onto that corner of the preserve than any of the houses in the street, just FYI. And this is another picture from yesterday, again, from the preserve. This little piece right here is what you can see of the proposed second story from a very small area in the preserve. Derek, you're on.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So we began with David's presentation because there has been so much overblown language, so much hyperbole, so much exaggeration that it's easy to lose sight of what actually is being proposed, which is only a 379 square foot second story element. Not a complete second story house, just one single room, nestled over the garage, which the applicants are at significant expense lowering to reduce the overall impact. It is not visible at all from most of the neighborhood. The total height is 16 feet 10 inches, so it's less than 17 feet, which could be built without any discretionary approval at all. The three immediate neighbors, the Pauls who live on the north, the neighbor to the west who is here today, and the neighbor to the south, they have no objection to this project at all. And those are the neighbors who are potentially most affected. We and many of the neighbors, there are about 40 neighbors who have weighed in on this project, saying that they favor it and they think it will be an enhancement to the neighborhood, or else they have no objection. That is a lot of neighborhood support, a lot. So with all respect, we believe that the people who are opposed to this are hung up on a definition, the definition of two-story. And the one thing with which I just flat disagree with my colleague, Mr. Shatillo, is that I do think the issue is size, bulk, and scale. I don't think it's a definition. I think it is your job, the Family Design Board's job, to try to figure out whether anything that's proposed is appropriate in its size, bulk, scale, and mass, and the sensitivity of its design to fit in this neighborhood. And we think that that's exactly what this project does. Far from being a bad precedent, we think this project shows how you can improve a home without impacting anyone else and making the neighborhood more attractive. So the essential facts are that the current home is only 1,111 square feet, not counting the garage, hasn't been remodeled for 50 years. It really does need updating. It is not possible as a practical matter to design a feasible, useful house all on one floor. Staff concurs with that, and Mr. Van Hoy looked at that very closely. So the property is zoned for 2 stories, up to for 30 feet. That's the zoning for all of these homes. I think that people who are here do not understand that it is possible to build a very high house, higher than this, the entire length of the existing building, some 65 feet, with no single-family design board approval at all. No planning commission approval, no appeal to you, no coastal commission, no nothing, because that's considered routine. Now, we're not threatening to do that. We're doing something that we think is much, much better. But we think that's important because it puts in context what we're proposing, which is so small and so modest. Now, the real issue, and I'd like you to put up the photo, the real issue is the view from Ms. Sider's home. And if you'd go to the next slide, David. Excuse me. So, go back one. So this is a panorama. I took this yesterday. All of this is ocean view that you see from Miss Sider's home. All of it. This area over here is where the house is. In front of these trees. So the statement that the appellant and her attorney have said, that this project virtually eliminates the ocean view, is categorically false. And yet, that is a statement that has been used to get so much concern in the neighborhood. The actual house, the story poles are up in this photo, is down here. And if you'd go one more, or is it one back one? I can't remember where the other one is. It's not critical. Those of you who were there yesterday and who actually had a chance to stand in Miss Sider's home will have seen that she has a quite nice little pocket views that are not affected at all. The one thing that really does affect her view is this tall tree. So when the Buseys first proposed their development, they were invited to the Sider's home, and they said, gee, we're relieved that our little addition doesn't impact your view at all. What does impact your view is our big tree here, and we would be happy to thin it out for you.
Not that tree, one next to it.
Oh, excuse me, this one?
Yes.
Okay, excuse me, I pointed to the wrong tree. This tree right here is the Busey's, and they offered to thin that out to improve the view of the Siders. She categorically rejected it. However, we're still happy to do it. What I believe should be done, 8 minutes, good. It says 1, panicked. So I believe that all homes, whether they are 2-story or 1-story, whether they are high or low, should be designed so that they are sensitive to the actual existing neighborhood and the neighbors, that it should respect private views to the extent it's realistic to do so. And that's exactly what we have done. So let me talk about the NPO. That ordinance was adopted, as you know, with a long, thorough, very comprehensive public review process. And all views in the neighborhood were carefully considered. The Allied Neighborhood Association played a very active role. It recognizes that neighborhoods change over time, and the goal was to make sure that it was done with sensitivity. Now, the NPO and the Single Family Design Board has been extremely effective. I remember, and Trish Allen, who's been working with us, remember many afternoons where all of your afternoons were consumed with Single Family Design Board appeals. How many have you had recently? Almost none. Why? Because the system is working. And if it isn't broken, don't fix it, because you run the risk of really creating very significant problems. It's simply, there is one other thing that Mr. Shatillo has said that I think is just flat incorrect, but you can ask Mr. Sweeney. They considered, the design board, all of the relevant definitions of neighborhood. Now, Mr. Sweeney said that he was very influenced by the 15-minute walking radius. The other 3 who voted for it did not articulate what their standard did, but they certainly all looked at the 20 closest because we provided the study. And they visited the area, and they walked the neighborhood, and they considered all of the factors. And it was their considered judgment that this design worked well. In their initial meeting, they unanimously approved the 2nd-story portion. Their only concern was a thin wall, which was proposed at the request of the immediate neighbors, the Pauls, and they later said, no, we're happy to have it not there at all, so that's why it was removed. While I remember, Jaime Limon put up one photo that showed where he had colored in with X's what this looked like. I want to clarify that part of that was the privacy wall that actually is no longer part of the project. So, based upon all of the facts, walking the neighborhood and their view of what a reasonable definition of neighborhood was, the Single Family Design Board approved the proposal. They said it was sensitive, restrained, appropriate, and that it would enhance the neighborhood. Everybody is complimentary about the architecture. And they adopted findings of fact, which we urge you to approve. Now, in the time I have left, there is zero precedent in the MPO for defining neighborhood as one block. What the appellants really want is you define neighborhood as 12 homes. The 6 homes on the west side of La Jolla and the 6 homes on the right side of La Jolla. There is zero precedent in the MPO for such a narrow definition. There is also zero precedent to say that you begin with the 20 closest homes. So the appellant has kind of turned the definitions on their head. We think you should look at the entire neighborhood. The great big neighborhood, the kind of 15-minute neighborhood, the neighborhood that we think is most appropriate, which is a little more constrained, kind of defined by the major streets and the streets you all go in and out of to get there, and also look at the 20 closest homes, and even look at this street. We think this design is beautifully compatible even with the narrowest of those definitions. If it were the rule, which it isn't, that the neighborhood is this one block only, we think it's compatible. Why? Because it's sensitive. It matches the architecture of the 2 houses to the south. It does not have any meaningful impact on Ms. Sider's view. None. She continues to have lovely pocket views of the ocean, and we're willing to make them even better. And there is no privacy issue. So why do I say that? The immediate neighbors, the Pauls, we originally proposed an addition on the north side, went to the Paul's house and said, gee, this isn't appropriate, and that's why we moved it to the south 25 feet away over the garage and then built the garage down. The Pauls no longer have an objection. Miss Sider's home is 120 feet from this second-story addition. So this room is a little bit over 50 feet long. So she is more, almost 3 times, about 2.5 times, the length from there all to there. There is no legitimate privacy issue. None. She has no curtains on her home. She has no wall. It's still a heck of a long way. The whole concern about looking down into a neighborhood just doesn't apply in this context. I want to talk just very, very briefly about the Douglas Family Preserve. This is an argument that has no substance whatsoever. The preserve is 70 acres. There is one area of about 20 square feet from which you can even see this addition, off in the distance. It is not going to be uplighted. The clear stories are only 11, 12 inches long. No meaningful impact at all. We have checked that the standard ordinance, and Mr. Hotchkiss asked me about this, standard ordinance does say that city parks close at 10, but there is an exception for Douglas Family Preserve and about 15 other parks, so it's supposed to close at sunset. Even if it were open all night, there is no meaningful impact. But I will say that this is an example of it's just difficult to take this argument from the appellant at face value, because there is one home that does have a significant impact on the light. And if you'll turn it on, I'll show it to you. This is the Sider home, which really does light up because it doesn't have a privacy wall and doesn't have curtains. The idea that this tiny addition that the Buseys are proposing would actually have a significant effect, we think, is zero merit, complete zero merit. We want to emphasize that we really did do what we thought was a good neighbor approach. The Buseys met with the meeting.
Have almost a minute left.
Okay, met with the Pauls. Repeatedly, Mrs. Sider chose not to meet except for the one time, and they have accommodated all their requests. We think they're hung up on a definition, and the actual size bunk scale is appropriate. So I want to thank you for your time. Your single-family design board, they're volunteers. They worked very hard on this, as they do on all of their projects. We think you should respect their considered judgment. We submit that there is no legitimate basis upon which you could conclude on appeal that the MPO somehow can be interpreted to define neighborhood as this one block only, and urge you to deny the appeal.
Thank you. You have 40 seconds left if you need it after.
I can keep going, right?
No. It's really okay. Any questions for Mr. Weston or Mr. Van Hoy? No. Okay. I think we need to take a little break before we get to public comment because there's quite a few here. So we'll take about a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Oh, well, imagination is silly.
I think there might have been some people who have left. We have quite a few speaker slips here, so I'm going to call the person, and then whoever's on deck can be, if they could be close by, so we can move this along. And again, there are 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes that you have here for the public. So we'll start with Judith Long, and we'll then have James Sider, and then Felicia Erickson. So is Miss Long here?
I'm right here, and
You need actually. Okay, but you need to say it at the. That's you with the orange roof. Got it. Okay.
I'm immediately downstream from the house, and I support the project. I think it's beautiful. I think it's within the character of the neighborhood. I would be obviously very affected by the privacy issue, but I think they've taken a lot of care not to make that an issue for us. 2 years ago or so, I guess, we were turned down by the Design Commission to build a second story on our house, and we were in the sight lines for view of the person who's the appellate in this case. We felt we made peace with that decision because we were in her sight view, and I thought it went. It was a reasonable and fair decision, and I think applying these rules fairly means sort of sticking to that objective criterion. And in that way, I think this is quite a nice project. Thank you.
Thank you. James Sider, be followed by Felicia Erickson. And someone is, like Tinkerbell is in the room or something. Thank you. Okay. Ms. Sider's not here? Okay. Mr. Sider was on Mesa School Lane. He opposes the project according to this. Felicia Erickson will be followed by Susan Shank, had to leave, right? And she opposed the project. And then Sean Petticord will be next. But Ms. Erickson, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Felicia Erickson. I have lived on the Mesa for 20 years, 10 years on the Marine Terrace, and 9 years in the current neighborhood at 2545 Medcliff Road. So I'm very close to this project. I am in support of the project. I believe we live in a very rich, diverse, and family-friendly community. There are many homes in our neighborhood that are not maintained or improved upon, so I'm pleased to see improvements that are made, and I'd like to see this project approved specifically because it is so thoughtful. They've done such a tremendous job of thinking of the neighbors, and further, it meets all of the guidelines as set forth by the Single Family Design Review Board. So thank you.
Thank you. Sean Petticord? Sean still here? Okay. John Malengo? Be followed by Gloria Hepp.
I support the project. Heard a lot of definitions today about what a block. Well, I define the area as Selrose to Medcliff to Mesa Lane, and in that area we counted 17 two-story homes, which were very high. They weren't in the 17-foot range. They were much higher than that. So I support the project. I think it's a good design. Thank you.
Gloria Hepp? Be followed by Joan Tomeo, or Tomeo.
My name is Gloria Hepp, and I've lived on the Mesa 47 years, and I'm a daily walker between the harbor and Arroyo Barrow and Meigs Road. And I feel that this project is nicer than most, or is a very nice project, and is respectful of the neighborhood, and I certainly wouldn't mind it in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Joan, and followed by Anthony Craddock.
Hi, thanks for taking all of our comments. My name's Joan Tomeo, and I live at the house right at the bottom on Medcliff with a red roof. And I'd like to clear up the contention by the attorney for the person putting in the deny here. They approved two-story 3 years ago. My home was awarded Santa Barbara Beautiful. We did not get unanimous support from the single-family design, so to say that people all get unanimous is not true. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think they're doing a beautiful job. We're very encouraged to see some very nice improvements in our neighborhood, which is way overdue. And thank you.
Anthony Craddock, followed by Patricia Craddock.
Patricia Craddock had to leave. So.
Okay, so then Robin Palmquist will be after you.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name's Anthony Craddock, and I live at 151 La Jolla Drive. We've had the house there for 32 years, and we have quite an involvement in the community. Both our children live here or in Carp, and we have 7 grandchildren that are either gone through or are going through the Santa Barbara school system or the Carp school system. And our house was, as I said, we've had it for 32 years. It was 2 stories when we bought it, and then we remodeled it about 15 years ago. It actually won an award for Remodel of the Year, or under 70 square feet, or I forget what it was. Anyway, it was 2 stories, still is 2 stories. I'm here basically to repeat the statement that we made before the SFDP. I think I've got it right. It's SFPD?
B, but that's okay.
ABR. And architect Dave Van Hoyes lived on the Mesa and has done several houses there, which I think are really appropriate and fit in with the Mesa and enhance the area. And the size, bulk, and scale of this particular project, I feel, is entirely appropriate. And so we support the project. Thank you.
Robin Palmquist, be followed by Kathy McCammon, and then Phil Palmquist.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Robin Palmquist. I live at 2536 Selrose Lane, just 4 houses away from the
two-story proposed addition on 215 La Jolla. And I've lived there for almost 23 years. So my husband and I raised our two daughters in our three-bedroom, two-bath, 1,500-square-foot cottage for the past 23 years. And I walk our neighborhood every morning. And I know how steep the roads are or aren't. I go from my house on Selrose, I go past down La Jolla over to the Mesa Lane steps down. If it's not a high tide, I go over to Hendry's Beach and then back up and around through the Douglas Family Preserve. So I know, and then back up Selrose. So I know how much there's either a steep road or not so steep. So I do know I've been in homes in my neighborhood. And the ones that they say are two-story on Selrose are actually, I've been in there, they are split level. So just so wanted to let you know. Anyway, I've witnessed wonderful, beautiful improvements, which I think is good for our neighborhood. And I've witnessed some not so good ones, and I've been a victim of one where they told us it was going to be so high, and now I have lights coming into my home, just so you know. And that's not very nice. So my neighbors next to me, David and Barbara Green, could not be here. David's in the hospital, and they do not want this to go through as well.
Need to wind up, please.
Yes. So anyway, while I would like to see something nice, I just think that the two-story is not a good precedent for this neighborhood. Thank you.
Kathy McCammon, then Phil Palmquist, and then Leslie Wiscombe.
Yes, I'm Kathy McCammon, and I'm here representing La Mesa Neighborhood Association. I'm their co-president. You've heard a lot today, and why we're concerned about this is in large part because of the precedent-setting nature of it, and also the city's own process and materials. We think the 2 points have been made, that this is an established neighborhood for 40-plus years. It's not by accident that this happened, but it was by agreement and consensus of the people that live there that this was an important area to preserve. The other concern that you've heard a lot about today are the single-family design review guidelines. Now, I took part in that long 2-year process plus on the neighborhood preservation ordinance, and it's clear to me that the 20 closest homes were to be used as part of a determination of compatibility. My point that is, I've heard staff say, oh no, it's not part of design compatibility. Well, if it's not, why in the world does it say it in your very compatibility guidelines? These are out there, they're on the internet. Nothing has changed. It says to help determine project compatibility with a neighborhood, the single-family design board will generally refer to a neighborhood study area defined below. It is defined below. It says neighborhood study area and goes the 20 closest homes to a proposed project. If this isn't accurate, why are your documents saying it? If people are confused, there's no wonder, because this is what it says, and then it turns out that the rules aren't really the rules.
Can you wind up, please?
Okay, we're concerned about the precedent-setting nature of it, because after the last hearings, I had people come up to me and say, oh, the Mesa is wonderful. It's a blank slate where if you get a good designer, you can do anything you want.
Thank you.
Well, I think we need to tell them and send them a
Thank you.
message that isn't true. Thank you.
Phil Palmquist, Leslie Wiscombe, and then Mike Jordan.
I'd like to thank all of you for this opportunity and all you do to serve our beautiful city of Santa Barbara. My wife Robin just spoke, so I won't repeat anything she said. I did send you all an email yesterday, which is longer. This will be really short. When my wife and I moved to our home back in 1991, we strongly felt at that time that both our privacy and the ambiance of this gorgeous and unique location would be best preserved by staying with the single-story homes. And we continue to feel that way. We feel that two-story additions in that area, compatible four houses away from where we reside to the south at whatever it is, 215 La Jolla, that it would be quite incompatible with the very essence and character of our neighborhood that we've grown to love so much and where we plan to spend the rest of our lives until they take us out in a box. Therefore, we highly recommend you reject the proposed second-story addition at 215 La Jolla. Thank you very much.
Leslie Wiscombe.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of City Council. I'm Leslie Wiscombe. I'm a Mesa resident, and I live about a 5-minute walk from the applicant's home. I'm a retired landscape architect, and I'm also a former City of Seattle Design Review Board member. And during my career, I did public work, so I understand the importance of public input and balancing my clients' goals with other stakeholders' valid concerns and issues. And I support the applicant's approved design, including the addition of the very modest second story. I visited the subject site, appellant site, and surrounding neighborhood during your site visit yesterday. I listened to your questions, and I've reviewed the drawings. I'm convinced both professionally and personally that this project will be an asset to the neighborhood. It fits well into our city's design criteria for size, bulk, and scale. On a personal note, my husband and I have employed the professional services of David Van Hoy, the applicant's architect, for 2 single-family home projects on the Mesa, one in which we live now and thoroughly enjoy. In both cases, we hired Mr. Van Hoy because of his long-standing commitment to our Mesa neighborhood and its character, his reputation for balancing his clients' needs with neighborhood compatibility and individual neighborhood concerns, and his proactive outreach and talent for building consensus amongst neighbors. And a lot of neighbors support this project. I don't believe that the proposed project sets a precedent for second-story development on La Jolla, but rather it's another example of a thoughtful design that addresses the needs of the owners, the concerns of most of the neighbors, and is compatible with the character of the neighborhood. I urge you to deny the appeal and allow the project to move forward as designed and approved by the Single Family Design Board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike Jordan will be followed by Roger Dixon and then Fred Hopp.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. I pretty much agree with everything Leslie said. I'm a resident of the neighborhood, the real neighborhood, not the faux neighborhood you're being talked about. I'm one of the purple blobs up on the map. This project's been reviewed. It's gone through the process that you set up, met the FAR guidelines, found consistent with the good neighbor policies, has a height that is less than what would be allowed as a single-story development, and the zoning and both the zoning and the policy support it. I would also caution you that if you buy into the argument that no two-story house should be allowed on that block, despite the obvious approval for zoning and guidelines, that you're dangerously close to constitute a taking from the rest of the people on that block. What's equally frustrating is what's taking place in the background. There's a modification process on Planning Commission this Thursday. Imagine your horror if I was out walking the neighborhood in the next 2 days, knocking on doors, seeking opposition to that while sitting on that review process on Thursday. That's exactly what's been taking place in this neighborhood, both for this appeal and a prior appeal down at the end of Edgewater. You have a sitting design board member who is generating opposition while making decisions as part of that design board process. I would encourage you to deny the appeal, uphold the decision of the Single Family Design Board, and please put some respect back in the process that can be publicly supported from your design board participants. Thank you.
Roger Dixon will be followed by Fred Hopp and then Joe Ruchon.
Howdy. My name is Roger Dixon. I live at 205 La Jolla. I think this proposed project would be a great addition to the neighborhood. I don't think looking to the past solely will give you any idea what's going to happen in the future. I think you guys should vote for it. Thank you.
Fred Hopp, then Joe Ruchon, then Trevor Martinson. The final speakers are Marlene and Frank Bushy.
My name is Fred Hopp, 50-year Mesa resident. I think it's a great project. Thank you.
There we go. Joe Ruchon. Beat that. No, I'm just kidding.
Thank you. Joe Ruchon, representing Allied Neighborhoods Association. Obviously, this project raises some very important points, one in particular, and it illustrates that point very clearly. If we're going to be serious about neighborhood preservation and protection, and I know we are, and compatibility of development, then we have to be able to define and delineate the neighborhood we are testing for compatibility. Up to now, it seems like we have been going about this in almost a willy-nilly, almost arbitrary manner, and allow incompatible existing development anywhere in the general area to justify new inconsistent projects in entirely different neighborhoods. The guidelines on this point, as written, are ambiguous. All we are asking for is the development of some consistent policy for defining neighborhoods. We are seeking a test for incompatibility. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trevor Martinson, then Marlene Frank Bushy, and then the final speaker will be Rhonda Sider.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Trevor Martinson, architect. I was at the meeting where the Single Family Design Board approved this project. And one of the things that bothered me, the forensic architect part of me, because that's I argue in court, is when there's a leading question made by the chair. And Mr. Sweeney said directly to Mr. Van Hoy is that this project cannot be designed on one story. Is that correct? Mr. Van Hoy said, yes. Well, I've been asked by the appellant attorney to look at these plans and design a single story. I was able to do that, no problem. And to me, this just represents what happened back in 1977. I went up to my office to just, in that 10 minutes was a little bit hard to do, but James Morris at Penfield and Smith, they had an adjacent tentative subdivision map. And what the specific things that the Community Development Department said that they are going to be split-level homes to be located on lots as shown on the plan. And number 7 in this letter, the ridge heights of the homes will not exceed 15 or 16 feet as stated by the applicant. There's no doubt in my mind that this project could be designed on a single story. No problem. I just think that the applicant by the Bushys and their architect wanted a second story, and they're trying to get away with it. Thank you.
Marlene and Frank Bushy.
Hello, I'm Marlene Busey.
Frank Busey.
And we live at 215 La Jolla Drive with our 2 children, Dario, who's 15 and is a freshman at Santa Barbara High School, and Dela, who's 11 and attends Santa Barbara Montessori School. The 4 of us love our neighborhood, particularly the children love the neighborhood because they can walk to the beach and ride their bikes wherever they like to be. Our home is too small for us as is, and it's in not very good condition. We feel that the design David has worked really hard to come up with will be an improvement to our whole neighborhood. And we'd like to thank you for your time and to thank our many supporters for coming today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rhonda Sider.
Hi, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate the people who were able to come out for this site, and I know Frank knows that I have curtains in my house because he saw me pull them shut. So many things I want to say, so I'm just going to go for the important things. I started out very naively purchasing this down at the planning department and turning to this page, and nowhere does it say that you need 85% FAR to look at the 20 closest homes. There's 3 criteria listed. General plan neighborhood, which we know is the West Mesa, immediate neighborhood, which was defined by Mr. Sweeney, and then the neighborhood study area are to be assessed for compatibility according to this. So I agree. Please change it if that's not true. It's very frustrating. I was not invited to any other meetings after my first meeting with the Boosies. And I have only received an envelope that says, "Hi, Rhonda," dated January 26, 14. David redesigned our project and hopefully addressed some of your concerns. Privacy is a huge one with just bamboo coming up, and the way it's terraced, the home, which no one has said, it has a sliding glass door, a huge window, and 3 clerestory windows that all face north, and just bamboo now. And my house level will be just about even with the second story. So I'm wondering how I can do privacy. I've had suggestions to just close my drapes, but that really affects the quality of my life, to live my life with my drapes closed all the time to ensure I have privacy. She says, please call me if you'd like us to bring the new drawings by for you to see, Marlene. I did not receive an invitation to any meetings. Also, I hope all of you had a chance to look this over. I had it delivered yesterday. The red dots are all of the neighbors.
You need to wind up,
Where's
please.
the camera? All the neighbors who are opposed, and you'll notice they are uphill. The ocean's here. This is the project. These are the people who will be the most impacted. The 100 block, the people
You're going to
speaking.
need to wind up, please.
Oh, I'm done?
Mhm.
The 100 block is not this area.
Yeah,
It's on the
we
bluff.
did get
Thank you very
your
much.
packet. Thank you. Okay, so that concludes public comment. The appellant, you have, Mr. Chitillo, you have a minute 35 if you need it, and you're welcome to use
Just
that.
a point of order before you start. I believe there was 5 minutes also because you started at 25.
No, I did not.
Or-
I started at 30.
Okay.
So you got a minute 35.
All right, and I'll talk fast. Well, thank you. I think just touching on a few issues. First, the issue of privacy. We prepared a graphic. This is in the exhibits. It's about midway through, and it shows graphically how, because of the stair step of the block, you can look directly into Ms. Sider's home. I think the only real objection, the only response to that the applicant or their attorney offered is that, well, it's 120 feet away, so it's no big deal. There's no privacy impacts. And that's, we think that the guidelines clearly state you need to protect privacy, and they're adding that second story, and the clear story windows and the deck on that side is definitely going to impact privacy. The use of bamboo is rather ambiguous in the plans, but as we saw at the site visit, the bamboo is not limiting itself to 8 feet. It's growing much taller than that. As a consequence, it's not effective necessarily as screening for privacy, but actually then goes on and blocks views. The bamboo that they're using is pretty thin. The issue of precedent is very significant in that this definition is not yet resolved. If you look at the staff report on page 5, it specifically says that we don't consider the neighborhood study as part of the compatibility process. And I think that's the most critical part of your analysis, to make sure that we have the opportunity to correct that issue. And I would note that of the neighbors that spoke and have both weighed in on either side, the folks that are uphill are the ones that have the objections, because they are going to be impacted. It was argued that they're not having an impact, and indeed they will. So there's larger issues here. I have run out of time, so I want to just wrap up and say thank you for your careful attention. We look forward to your careful evaluation of these issues, but I think there's some very important planning issues, neighborhood compatibility that is going to have a citywide impact. So I'm glad we were able to bring this forward to you, and appreciate your recognizing the importance of this.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weston, you have 40 seconds. You might have an extra couple seconds, given I gave some to him, but not many.
I can do it in 40 seconds.
Okay.
3 brief points. One, it is simply not correct, and you should ask Fred Sweeney if you question this, that the design board did not start by looking at the 20 closest homes. They looked at everything, and they spent a lot of time. So took into account exactly what they should. Second, during the process of adoption of the MPO, many different definitions of neighborhoods were considered, and one of them was block by block. That option got 4%. 4%. The option that was ultimately selected, which is in the code, got, I think, 58%. Mr. Limon would know. And the last thing is I wanted to show you this slide. This is the slide of the 40 people who live in the neighborhood who are either active supporters, that's the first 33, or else neutral and have no objection to the process, to the project at all. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything from staff that need to clarify or anything that came up? Nope. All right. So it's to the council. Don't all put your lights on at once. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question first. I wanted to ask Mr. Sweeney to come up, if you would. I'm tipping my hand a little bit by my question, but
yes,
the question that the thing that sticks out for me as the biggest question is the deck and its potential to be and have an impact on the appellant's property. And I want to ask your combined board member -- designer viewpoint of that, and the thought being, what if the deck were to go away as one option and have a clear story on the north side? So that's
Thank you. To answer your question correctly, the deck is not that large. We on the single family, we see far larger decks positioned in very difficult positions. I don't think this is a bad one. I was probably in the minority and maybe didn't express it during the several hearings we reviewed this house that really wanted that privacy screen up there just to reinsure that the immediate next door neighbor didn't have a problem. But that didn't seem to carry the day. And then when the immediate neighbor said, look, I'd just soon not have it, at that point I felt that was probably a minor issue compared to all the other issues this project's presenting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well then, Madam Mayor, first of all, I want to thank, this hearing today shows the ferocity and pride that our city takes in our place and in this community. And thank each of you for your presentations. Mr. Chatillos is obviously dug into many of the core elements of the NPO, which again, as others have said, the fact that we're seeing so many fewer of these appeals really indicates that the NPO, Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance, for the folks who aren't doing this every day, has really helped us tamp down the number of these appeals that come forward. And clearly, the second story issue throughout the city is the hottest button neighborhood issue. Size, bulk, and scale, and second stories in general are the big deals. And threading the needle on them is always going to be a huge challenge, and it does go through neighborhoods as a kind of a shock. I support this project, and I think that Mr. Van Hoy's, first of all, he's obviously had some practice at this neighborhood, and has responded to the design statement that is made in this neighborhood, and the fact that he's dug this in so that and minimized the size of the second floor. Those pieces work for me. And then when I was at the appellant's house, I did see that there's a bit of ocean view that is obstructed, but there's a ocean view that remains. My colleagues have heard my questions about the deck, and I'll be interested to hear if anybody else has anything to talk about that. That seemed like the one issue where perhaps people could there could be a view issue there, which that would be an area where I'm going to be interested in hearing what others have to say. I think thinning the tree is a good idea, and as I say once again, I just want to thank. I think that this was an eloquent debate here, both sides, and today often I'm in support of Mr. Chitillo's statements. I think we learned a lot today. There's definitely some material for the Single Family Design Board to chew on here. But I thought that the project as it's presented is strong enough for me to be able to support.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Chitillo, I wanted to credit your statement that virtually this eliminates the view of the ocean currently enjoyed from her home as advocate enthusiasm, since I think it's pretty obvious that it doesn't. But and that you said the second story would dramatically compromise privacy enjoyed by all of the uphill neighbors. Well, at least one neighbor we know doesn't think that. And a second story element that will peer into the DFP and many surrounding homes. I'm not sure where you get the peering thing. It doesn't seem to compute with me. And insofar as, did you want to answer that?
If you want to ask.
Not particularly. No, I don't want to get into the debate. I'm just telling you what seems like a real stretch here. Hey, you're being a lawyer. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. You got paid for it. And I've never understood why we contest neighborhood compatibility here when 3 out of the 6 houses on the street will be designed in exactly the same style. As for a view, spoiling somebody's view from the DFP at night, there's not supposed to be anybody at the DFP at night, so even if this were in your face, it wouldn't pertain. I think that's as far as I'll go right now. I think you can see where I'm leaning here, but insofar as no other place to locate the addition, Mr. Martinson has claimed otherwise. He's the sole person, except you, that has said that, so that doesn't hold a lot of water with me. I think that regardless of what I think of the design, they have gone out of their way to make real changes over and over again, and that should be respected. I'm sorry that Ms. Sider feels that she's losing all her privacy. I think she may be losing a little bit, but I hope it's not really affecting her in the long run. And finally, that seems to me the process worked here, as rigorous as it was. And even to the point of an appeal. So I will vote against the appeal, but long as painful as it has been, that's the way it's supposed to work, and I think it is working.
Mr. Hart?
Well, I agree with my colleagues who really respect the comments that people have taken the time to make. I think this has been a really healthy discussion, and I think that both sides have been very well represented. Obviously, it was a close call at the Single Family Design Board, but I really want to respect that process, and I think it's important that the council do that. So I would make a motion to deny the appeal, uphold the Single Family Design Board's decision to approve the project and make the following findings in the staff report. And I think to Mr. Chitillo's core question about, what defines a neighborhood, from my perspective here at the council, I think having flexibility to define that more broadly is the appropriate way for the Single Family Design Board to look at these issues. I don't think that having a very, very narrow definition of that serves the best interest of planning, and I think that having that flexibility is important. I think that's why these are guidelines rather than specificity in that respect. So that's the reason for my support.
Mr. Francisco?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also want to join my colleagues in thanking everybody who's participated in this. And there are very good arguments being made on both sides. The question about the definition of a neighborhood is important, and it's ambiguous, and it changes from place to place. I would say, for instance, Brinkerhoff Avenue is a neighborhood, and that's, I believe, something around 20 houses. So different parts of the city, what really defines a neighborhood varies. And one of the things that I was struck by, I had never been on La Jolla Drive before in all the years I've lived in Santa Barbara. And when I drove onto that street and got out and started walking around, I thought, my God, this is like stepping back into my childhood. And one of the really attractive features of that street is the fact that the houses, though very similar, are not all exactly the same. And there is a really clear topographical design element to that neighborhood. And that's one of the really charming things about it. And I agree with Mr. Chitillo on his question about whether the closest 20 homes, the neighborhood study area, should be a part of the compatibility analysis. Of course they should. That's what it says in the guidelines. And so if you look at just those closest homes, I believe there's only one that's a two-story home. So there's a legitimate concern there. On the other hand, at least as I saw it, when I was standing in Ms. Sider's backyard looking out both at the applicant's house and as well as the surrounding area, what struck me was that the biggest obstruction to views in that area in general is trees, not other houses. I know there'll be other people who'll come after me for saying this, but I think they should get rid of some trees and things would be a lot nicer there. And as well as the power poles, the Edison line. That strikes me as another big visual problem in that neighborhood. And I also agree that there is the danger of a precedent-setting change if we approve this project, if we uphold the Single Family Design Board's approval of this project. But there may also be another kind of precedent being set here, and that is to only approve a second story in this neighborhood if it can be shown that it does not impact the privacy of neighbors, and that though there's nothing in any of our ordinances that says private views must be protected, there was clearly an effort made here to protect the private views of neighboring houses. And I think if we view that as the precedent that we're setting for this neighborhood, that's a good precedent. It will severely limit what people can do in terms of a two-story addition, but I think that sort of limitation is proper. So I know that this was a very close decision for the Single Family Design Board. It was not a unanimous decision. And I know that there are people on both sides of this issue who feel very strongly. I wish there were a way to make everybody happy. But I believe that the applicant did the best they could to meet the obvious objections that this sort of thing would raise in the neighborhood. I think Mr. Van Hoy has done an excellent job of coming up with a design that is compatible stylistically with the neighborhood. And when we were there the other day, we saw some other houses that have been upgraded in a style that is consistent with the neighborhood, and that's a good thing. So I will vote to deny the appeal. I understand the concerns that people have, but I think if we view this as precedent-setting in terms of being sensitive to what the surrounding neighbors need, both in terms of view and privacy, I think it's a good precedent.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be supporting the motion as well. I think there's been some very good lawyering done here. And I really do appreciate Ms. Sider. I think you're looking out not just for your own interests, but for the interests of your neighborhood. That's clear. I'm glad, Mr. Chitillo, that you did take our coastal resources into consideration. Thank you for asking and caring about the Douglas Family Preserve. It's a funny place because I think there are it's habitat for wildlife, and yet people and their dogs, also inhabit the place, and so it offers both, and I know it's a delicate balance there, and I do care about the birds and lighting pollution. So thank you though for Councilmember White said, digging it up. So you did dig into some good issues. And I do understand that people are worried about their neighborhood. I'm not so critical of the people who are looking at just the 20 houses or just the block. I consider my neighbor, I'm really close to the people right on my street, the people across the street and right next to me. So they're my closest community. So I get it, and I know people are worried about the change from single story to second story. And I hope that our processes make sure that we only approve things that don't destroy character. But without a covenant or legal restrictions, the zoning says allows for the addition. So I have to agree with that. And then I would, though, Mr. Limon, ask for consistency. There was some question about whether it is the 20 homes. So you say you use those for convenience when there's a floor area ratio calculation, and that the single family design board in most cases uses the 15-minute thing. So I'm just asking for consistency on that, because it would not be fair if in one project you apply just the 20 and in another, the neighborhood is bigger. As much as you can be consistent. I think I'm getting it, that there is some subjectivity. I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Jordan said about activism on our design review boards. I've seen it in not just this case, in others. And there really is, it's an honor to serve on our advisory boards as it is to serve on the council. And we really have to be our best selves and have integrity in what we do. I'm wondering, I saw the photographs from Ms. Sider's house taken yesterday, and I was wondering if you took those pictures without her permission. It seemed like she invited us into her home, and I was grateful and honored to be in your home and yours. And if I might say, it seemed a little sneaky if you took a picture of the view so that you could use it against her at today's hearing. And especially when you came into the process with so much on your side and the staff recommendation. So what I'm hoping in my closing remark would be, because it seems like you guys are neighbors, and I hope you make peace with each other. And the bamboo is going to be, I have it in my yard and it's totally out of control. But if you're negotiating the screen, if you're negotiating other things, so that you maybe you can get to a place where you're good neighbors again, then I would hope that. I would hope that this doesn't turn into neighbors disliking neighbors, especially the ones who were on this side and the others who were on that side, because I think everyone came out with the best of intentions. Thank you.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, as someone who lives on the east side of the Mesa on a 6,000 square foot lot, and our tract was built in 51, and what we realize is that families don't raise 2 or 3 kids in 1,200 square foot with one bathroom and a kitchen about the size of the space I'm sitting in right now anymore. So everybody remodeled when those CC&Rs. I think they expired in 1976, and I think that was kind of the birthplace of the FAR, if I'm not mistaken, with all the Mesa development. But what I was impressed by going to La Jolla yesterday was what a very cool neighborhood it is, and what a contiguous neighborhood. I've always liked that area around there. But to me, today, I think that the opposition I've heard to the project was almost more about the process and precedence than it was about the project itself. I think that the applicants have actually done a respectful job of treating their neighbors well. I think Mr. Van Hoy clearly has a feel for the street and understands the street, and has tried to make it work so that it really does still fit in. I was frankly struggling to see. I was, number one, very glad that the story poles were there, and I think this was a fabulous job by all members concerned, staff and both sides as far as presenting this case. But it was great having the story poles there to be able to walk around and see what we were exactly talking about. And frankly, I'm not the tallest guy on the board, but I had trouble seeing the story poles in a lot of areas. I believe that there are neighbors that are trying to be good neighbors, and I think if we go on strictly on precedents, I think that there is. I mean, I can't imagine that the folks on that street are going to want to make a complete restriction on second stories in perpetuity. It's going to affect everybody's property values, and 6,000 square feet is 6,000 square feet. So, but that's up to the neighbors. I think this project's respectful. I think it fits. I'm going to support the project and deny the appeal.
Again, thank you to everyone who's been here, and I think it was a good discussion. It brought back a lot of memories, being one of the folks on the council at the time to go through, and it was, I think Kathy was asking if it was 2 years. I think it was closer to 3.5 years. It was most of my first term on council where we went through this process for the neighborhood preservation ordinance, and as many of our colleagues said, that actually the number of appeals have changed dramatically, reduced dramatically. Probably part of that had to do with the recession and no one was building anything, but really the dramatic change from the beginning of the MPO moving on up through now has been dramatic in a good way. And actually, I do think that a lot of what Mr. Chatillo said in terms of polishing maybe some of the guidelines and clarifying some things is probably would be helpful. I remember the 20 closest homes debate. I think that was about 3 months of the 3.5 years. I don't know. It took a long time. I mean, because a neighborhood, what is a neighborhood? It's all these different aspects of it, and then what is a neighborhood on the west side versus on the Riviera versus on the Mesa versus the east side. I mean, there's different aspects to a neighborhood that make it click and make it feel like what's that whole piece, and you don't want to create a cookie cutter approach in different parts of town. So I think we came up with something as good as we could get. Perhaps the guidelines just need a little brush over just to see, so when anyone looks at them, they get what the process is. And if my memory serves me right, the 20 closest homes analysis was really for designs that were above 85% FAR. So this is just on the borderline. It wasn't required, but I'm glad you did it. I think that showed good intent and good faith effort, even though you didn't technically were required to do that. But I can see how that then creates confusion on the flip side about, well, you did this 20 closest home study, and what does that mean? So I don't know. Maybe it's after close to 10 years now worth just looking at the language. I wonder. I want to bring up what Mr. White said in terms of the deck on the north side, and I think this is the key piece about this particular appeal. There are two pieces. One about issues about second stories, but I think the key piece with this particular appeal had to do with the privacy issue. And even though from the deck there it's small and to the side from the look of the view, still, if someone's sitting there and can look up and can see, then if you can see, you can see. Either can or can't. And I know the motion didn't give any direction back to Mr. Van Hoy and the project of looking at something as you go to final design, but maybe giving some attention to the north side deck and doing whatever we can to try to reduce that level of privacy issue looking up the hill. I think you've been trying to do that, and there's been things that were added and then taken away, but I would like to personally see anyway if that could be focused on as part of the final design, of if there's any kind of not major, but shift that could actually address the concern listed here. What else do I want to say? I think, Mr. Chatillo, I also think, had a good comment about precedent of that particular block and what that could mean in the long term. That is an issue in the sense that if it was a much bigger second story, I could see that becoming a bigger issue. But as I read the reports and some of the documents, there were other proposals that right in that vicinity for second stories that were actually denied for some of the reasons of it was just too much. I think we're on the right path here. It's a beautiful design, and it might become Van Hoy Street soon. I don't know. How many houses do you have? No, don't say that to Mr. La Jolla or whatever. However, that street was named, but I hope again, and I want to echo Councilmember Murillo about neighborhood compatibility in the sense of neighborliness, and after this appeal coming together and celebrating each other as a neighborhood, because it's a fabulous, fabulous area. It's one of my favorite places to precinct walk. You take a break at the Douglas Family Preserve when you need to, and it's just a lovely, lovely area. And I think the respect of each other, especially with the Douglas Family Preserve there as your neighborhood park, is quite special in this town. So I don't think by having a 7-0 vote that means that we didn't hear what Mr. Chatillo had to say. I think he brought up some really good points, and I think it's worth just looking at our guidelines to make sure it's as clear as they can be. But I'll be joining my colleagues. So, Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so perhaps we could, I have an additional request to the maker of the motion in the second, and that is that an advisory comment be added, that the applicants offer to thin that tree, which might improve the view of the appellant, that be added, as I say, strictly as an advisory comment, and then the mayor's comment about the deck, at least to have SFDB have a look at it, have another look at it, and see if there's something that could be done to improve the privacy there. I'd ask that those two things be considered for the motion.
I'm happy to include the language about the tree. I think the deck is problematic because my sense was that the Single Family Design Board's conflict was, do you put a permanent wall up as a permanent privacy barrier, or do you have that open to protect the view? And I think that's the essential conflict, and I think they wrestled with that to a successful conclusion. I think that when people are on the deck is much less of the time than when the wall would permanently be there. So to me, having the wire barrier is a better balance than a permanent wall. And I don't think that it's a question. I don't think anybody appears talking about a question of getting rid of the deck. So it's sort of regrinding that issue over and over again, and I don't personally see that that's our place.
I don't see that there's a different. I don't think Mr. White was saying put back the wall. I'm just saying look at it more carefully and seeing if there is something that hasn't been thought of before. It's just as an advisory component to the motion, but it's not a requirement as I'm understanding.
I guess I'm fine with the motion with the tree, but not the deck.
I echo Mr. Hart's idea about the tree and not the wall. I don't think we want to send it back with that advisory. It seems to me they've bent over backwards trying to do it right so far, and just leave it as it is and vote on the motion.
Did you want to? Oh, okay. Okay, all those in favor? Oh, yes, Mr. Kalan.
Sorry to
No, you did it just in the nick of time.
Members of the council, I'd like to have a chance to draft findings that are responsive to the evidence you heard today. I think the staff findings are excellent, but they were not drafted with the benefit of what you heard today, and they also don't reflect your comments. So if you could make this a motion of intent directing staff to bring back a resolution of findings, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
And I'm happy to amend the motion to that effect.
Okay. Seconder, okay with that? So that means it'll come back to a consent calendar agenda item for us to approve the findings. Is that right? Okay. We all know what the motion is then?
That's
yes?
correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. If you could quietly leave the room, we have one brief thing before we're done up here, which is council member committee assignment reports. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended a few events this weekend. The Coalition Against Gun Violence put on a great forum on gender violence. The ACLU had their annual garden party. Our youth council, to which I'm the liaison, had a leadership training event this weekend. And just to preview what the youth council is doing in the future, With your help, Madam Mayor, and your support, they're putting on a workshop on bullying. So it's anti-bullying, and that's October 30th. So mark your calendars. I went to the Cause lunch. I've walked the neighborhood at Casa Esperanza. That's part of my work on the Milpas Action Task Force. I talked to the businesses and some residents in the area to make sure Casa residents are not impacting the neighborhood. Things are way much better since they required sobriety. I went to the Coast event with some of my other colleagues, and our own Grant House was given an award for his advocacy for bicycling, pedestrians, and bike use. And the Parks and Recreation Commission had a presentation from the YMCA, which is taking over the space that Primo Boxing used to have. And it looks like they're putting in some really good services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You've been busy. Mr. Hart.
Last week I attended the Police and Fire Commission where they talked a little bit about this with Councilmember Rouse, as a matter of fact, talking a little bit about the State Street enforcement issues and the discussion that we're going to have subsequently about security guards and police officers and things like that. I was also at the Coast event with Councilmember Murillo and Mayor Schneider and attended the CEC Green Gala, which was a wonderful event at the Lark Restaurant. A lot of people there, did a lot of fundraising for CEC, and then also was pleased to be at the Santa Barbara Beautiful Awards on Sunday, recognizing a lot of great development in Santa Barbara.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually from a previous meeting of the Airport Commission where they're repaving much of the airport. I don't know if you all knew that, and that regarding wildlife, there have been some wildlife strikes. They are down. There have only been 2 such events in the last 5 years that caused temporary grounding of aircraft. One was actually the Vice President's plane, apparently. And the most recent strike was September 16th, 2014. Passenger traffic was down 13% last month, actually for August, yes, and 4% for the year.
Mr. White.
I presented the infrastructure road show on last Wednesday at the Faulkner Gallery. It was sparsely attended. I think there's a little bit of a change of strategy that's underway where the presentation will go more to such as the Rotary Club and take the presentation to the habitat rather than trying to get people out of their homes to come. And I think hopefully that'll be a more successful strategy.
I think it's a bit of both. So we already put the dates out. So there's a lot of both. So a lot of roadshow. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the regular meeting of the Downtown Organization Safety Committee, and thereafter I went on a beat walk with Officer Greg Hans up and down State Street and was very, very, very impressed at his firm, authoritative, but very gentle and very diplomatic handling of issues on State Street. So it was a great experience. I would encourage my colleagues to do that anytime, a walk along.
This past weekend, I was in Sacramento. The U.S. Conference of Mayors had their fall leadership meeting, and I co-chair a task force for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which is why I was invited to that. And it was, I have a lot of material I just brought back with me, but it was a jam-packed day and a half. Some of the highlights included talking about innovation in cities, and there was a discussion with the founder of Uber, and then a panel with both OpenGov and Box, which is dealing with cloud serving. I don't know what it is, but it was very cool. And Lyft, and if you might remember Logan Green, who we appointed to the MTD board once upon a time, he learned his public financing of transit through that, and now he is the co-founder of Lyft, so it was great to see him. There was stuff about summer reading programs and how libraries can be a part of that in terms of early childhood learning, and stuff about water and EPA rules and how dealing with mandates and affects our rates, and there's a nationwide survey going on that we'll participate in. But probably the most important part of the discussion was a 2-hour discussion talking about Ferguson and talking about community policing We had the mayor of St. Louis who gave an update of what's going on in that suburb town right outside St. Louis, his perspective dealing with having to deploy officers. You may recall in the press this past weekend there were some officers shot in Ferguson lately, and there was a St. Louis police officer who was shot. They're fine, but so there's still tension there. And a panel with the police chief from the Salt Lake City, who was amazing. He's part of the National Chiefs Association or something like that. The mayor from Gary, Indiana, and the attorney, and I'm forgetting his name, I think it's Grubb or Krupp. He's actually the attorney representing Michael Brown, and he represented Trayvon Martin. So it was a very raw, frank, good discussion with a lot of people in the room, a lot of things to take back, and talking about the role of police in the community and mayors about when crises like these happen and what to do to prevent them in the first place. So lots of other things, but it was a great couple of days up in Sacramento. So, okay, with that, we have some closed session items to read.
Item number 13, conference with real property negotiators. Item number 14, conference with city attorney, pending litigation. The pending litigation is Frank Benalis, Sebastian Alda Jr., Jacqueline Inda, Crisito Herrera Cruz, and Benjamin Cervantes.
Thank you, and we don't expect to report anything out today, so we'll adjourn from closed session. Thank you.